that you've seen from people on Twitter, and that's like the main informing thing in your life. Like this is what I'm fighting against because I saw really bad tweets on a Sargon video.
On the Independent, right? Lauren Southern.
On the Independent, she just said that article didn't exist.
She said it talked about women having children.
This is my guess. Without ever reading that article, my guess is going to be that the actual article itself is probably pretty nuanced. It probably has something to do with Western people contribute more to climate change or some shit like that. I'm probably not going to read the article and come away thinking, wow, they really want white people to have less kids. That would be my guess if I had to read the article without ever having seen it or heard of it before.
Right, but the issue is you have the exact same thing said by Macron where he says, hey, in Africa, they should stop having so many kids because it's hurting their ability to raise them properly and to raise healthy children, and everyone calls him a racist. So for some reason, it is racist for Macron
Who is everyone?
to say, hey, you shouldn't be having 9 babies.
Who is
the
everyone?
BBC did an article on it. You shouldn't be having 9 babies in Africa. That's
so
racist
I can find
to
a
say.
BBC article calling Macron
racist.
racist?
Kids repeatedly in Europe, don't have kids repeatedly in America, that's suddenly like A-okay. That is a great narrative. And in fact, lots of feminist philosophers say we must, will you deny the fact that many feminist philosophers say we must dissolve the white nuclear family?
No, this is the problem when you argue with you people is that what you guys do is you find, like, if I want to argue against a policy by...
you people?
You people, you know what I mean. When I want to argue against a policy by, say, Republicans in the United States or right-leaning politicians in the United States, I can point to actual legislation penned by actual congressmen and senators in Congress, and I can talk about the impacts that these things will have. So, for instance, attacks on women's rights to choose for an abortion, or the North Carolina voter ID law, or the transgender ban that Trump was to do, right? I point to these things and I'll say these are problems. But then for Lauren or Roaming Millennial or No Dumbass or whatever, what you guys will do is you'll find, well, look at these 7 tweets that I found, and look at the professor that I had in college. Like, how can you think that these things are at all the same type of thing?
The professors are actually more important. Again, politics is downstream of culture. You change culture first, and then politics eventually ends up reflecting that.
Do you really believe that? Do you really believe what you're saying right now? So you believe that right now a person...
The people, hang on, Destiny, I'm a woman, let me talk, stop mansplaining. The people that are being taught by these professors right now, or even like younger than that, in Sweden, there's a state school system. It's you don't have things like private schools or charter schools like we do have. But when you have this almost anti-Western bent being taught from the time children go to school, especially when they're in university, that affects the way people think, and eventually that affects the way people vote. So yes, that is even more important than legislation. It's very easy to overwrite legislation. It's very hard to change the way people
Your entire argument is that
wait, let me just jump in here. Sorry, I just want to point out that The Guardian called Macron racist, Vox called Macron racist, The Independent called Macron racist. This is just the first page of articles, so there are backups to what I'm saying, but continue.
I would love to see the articles. I'm curious about. Yeah, we can look it up. But essentially, what you
look it up.
Yeah, I will. Essentially, what you're saying.
I gotta peace out. I've got a voice training appointment, but Theron and Destiny, I'll buy you a drink later, and peace.
Thank you for joining us, Contra. I really appreciate it.
What you're essentially saying is that if the leftist policies in the school carry on long enough, it is possible that at some undetermined date in the future, left-leaning thought might actually make it to Congress where right-leaning thought is now. That's what you're essentially saying.
Not only that is possible, but also just that it's manifest in our lives right now.
But you can't point out a single way it has been in terms of legislation or policy. You're talking about
in our
tweets.
statistics. Look at the number of unwed mothers. Look at the number of single mothers. That's it manifest right there.
So left-leaning thought is causing...
Look at the number of children who are... Look at the number of children not having children. It manifests in our society right now.
What policy has a Democrat proposed to the United States that's caused this to happen?
Well, I think abortion would be one of them. The welfare state would be another.
Abortion contributes to single... That's literally the opposite of having an unwed single mother.
We're talking about life choices in general, and the way now that abortion is so readily available, women are free to be a lot more promiscuous, and they're making worse decisions for their lives. And the level of promiscuity that women exhibit during their dating period really affects their likelihood of forming long-term stable commitments like marriage later on in life.
So you think the government needs to be legislating morality for how promiscuous we're allowed to be? I thought you were the person of small government.
I didn't say they need to legislate you can't sleep with these people, but when we're talking about things like, let's say welfare states, like if you enable a behavior and make it easier to do, you're encouraging it. And it's not that we need to outlaw promiscuity, but we shouldn't make it easy for large single mothers to have these large families that they're raising without fathers. We shouldn't be subsidizing that because it encourages that behavior.
Okay, I can
jump in here quickly. I will give you a chance to respond, but we've had someone join the chat. Who is Brightside here?
Hello. so I wanted to join in.
Oh, wonderful. We've got Meadow
This is
Curse
the
here,
under
everyone.
4 feet tall club, right? Did I jump into the right stream?
I think you're here. Did you wear the costume?
Yes, I
Did you
did.
show up?
I did.
Perfect.
I dressed as a
Perfect.
leprechaun, so I think I should fit in.
Excellent. What do you have to contribute to this wonderful stream so far, Meadow Curse, since you've decided to join us?
I've just been enjoying listening to everybody yell at each other. That's been fantastic. Who doesn't like that? A nice heated debate going on is always entertaining.
All right, perfect. Steven, did you want to continue?
Yeah, so I guess like in terms of
Everyone?
American values or American society, I thought that, or at least for my goal personally, for my personal philosophies, you always want to enable people to make the most choices that they can to maximize their own personal happiness. So things like access to contraceptives or things like giving women the right to choose for an abortion, these are positive things. If you want to argue against it, I mean, you can, but that seems to be, like earlier, I think you made fun of Nick because you said that he was authoritarian and you were libertarian, but now you're talking about how the state needs to cut off access to things like abortion because we're enabling women to make bad choices or something.
Well, I think abortion is its own thing because I think, someone's freedom to abortion is not trumped by the right of a fetus to, not die. But when we're talking about things like the welfare state, which I also mentioned, the welfare state is basically the antithesis of small government.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but we're
And
not
that-
talking
and
about the
that is
welfare state.
very
You were talking
much-
about like
and
the
that is very much-
promiscuity of women as like that was an
Well,
issue
it's
that needed to
both.
be addressed
It's
by
both.
government.
Well, it's both. So the welfare state and abortion, those things in tandem have, I think, very much destroyed the prevalence of the nuclear family, especially when we're talking about low-income communities. And if we're looking at that now, like 40 years ago or 50 years ago, the African American instance of marriage was comparable to white families. If we look at that now, it's totally been destroyed, and we can't ignore the policy implications that have come from things like enlarging the the welfare state. And when we're talking about, I by the way never said we should limit access to contraception. That's something you threw in there. Just want to mention that's something I've never said. But we can't ignore that when we subsidize something, we make it easier to do, and that's very much the fact with single mothers right now.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, guys,
I mean,
let's.
okay.
This is getting a little. This is stagnating in one spot. We're just screaming at each other about single motherhood. Not that it's not a fascinating topic and a massive problem in the West right now, but I do want to see if anyone wants to move on to any other topics so that we can keep this entertaining, keep this fun, and move on to other people. Nick, Theron, Meadowcur, anything you want to talk about?
Not in
No
particular.
bullshit.
No, I'm good.
I mean, if we're opening it up to just different topics of conversation, Destiny, what brand of stilts do you use? Because
That was a nice one, dude. I love it when people that literally use a cartoon avatar build their entire personality around attacking other people's physical appearance. That's actually really funny to me,
Get
my
off
dude.
your high horse.
That's
all right?
really good. You got any more there in your little book there? I know how long you've been waiting for this. You're
Are
like
you sure that's
you're
not
real
yours?
excited here to
I
do it.
borrowed
Keep
it
going,
from
my
you,
dude.
the little book.
What cartoon picture did you use to represent yourself for this conversation, buddy? Oh,
Three
just the
homosexual
standard,
ones.
just
You
the
should- you
standard
should
Google one.
appreciate
That's
it.
pretty funny, dude.
You should appreciate
You're
it. Appreciate it.
hilarious. You're a riot, my man.
I know you love it. I know you love it. That's why I'm here
Well,
to bring the banter, Destiny.
This has just spiraled into productivity, guys.
Well, people in the chat, and I've talked a lot, so I don't need to start on this, but people are in the chat are asking about the whole "it's okay to be white" thing. So I don't know if like Theron, Destiny, any of you guys have any, like, maybe we could talk about that.
Sure, perfect.
I don't know. Is anybody in this call selling fucking T-shirts about this? Because that's kind of gay. I gotta be honest. I've heard some people are trying to make some money off of that. It's a little bit dumb in my opinion.
Right, I'm actually going to be hoping to go out and put some of the posters out soon. I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing to put out and to support. It's simple, pisses people off for all the right reasons. T-shirts a little silly, manufacturing at mass. But Steven, do you find it's okay to be white particularly offensive?
I mean, it's pretty obvious what the goal is. I guess if your goal is to just piss people off. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the All Lives Matter movement.
Well, no, it's to expose a clear hypocrisy.
Well, no,
I
it
mean,
doesn't
you had
really
a
expose
campus
any
come out.
hypocrisy. It's
You
like
had a campus come out and say this message does not represent our university. A message that says it's okay to be white.
you really just read it. You read the line, Lauren, and that's it. You just take it at face value like that.
What? What are you
What?
talking about, Destiny? It's obvious what's going on in the country with an anti-white bias. It's
Anti-white.
clear.
Oh God, it's so hard to be a white man today in
Hey,
America.
Steve.
Oh God.
Steve, Well, actually, it's easy because
Oh,
being
man.
white, we are pretty strong. We've been through a lot, so it's not difficult. But there is an anti-white bias. Look, affirmative action policies.
Oh man, affirmative action. Holy shit. All that generational wealth handed down by whites over and over again. And
I
oh
didn't
no,
receive any
in some
generational
schools,
wealth. Hey,
in
Destiny,
some
I didn't
schools, some
receive any
kids. Oh
generational
man.
wealth. I
Oh,
didn't
I'm glad that
receive
your
anything.
personal story is representative of the average white man in the United States. Once again, you
No, but the
display
point
such a
is-
cunning
the point
understanding
is-
of statistics and data. Keep it up.
The point is, the only institutional discrimination in the country today is against white people. And you, I'm sure, maybe you're some kind of Black Lives Matter cuck, but many people have it in their minds that black people are discriminated against. That there's this institutional racism against non-whites. But in fact, the only institutional on the books policies that discriminate in practice in written code against white people are those affirmative action policies. And you ask if those hurt people. You ask if that makes a difference. Of course it does. You know, that you tell somebody who's white they don't get to go to college because of the color of their skin. They don't get a job because of the
Too
color
bad
of
in
their
places
skin.
where that was challenged, like at the University of Texas, they still took the top 10% of applicants, and the Supreme Court struck that down as not necessarily being a racist policy.
You're using your personal
man.
story to disprove
My personal
data.
story? I'm not a UTech student. I'm
Using
sorry. I
one
didn't know that citing
example.
Supreme
Alright,
Court
one
law. And if you want to talk about actual discrimination, we can go back to more Supreme Court law, like the voter ID laws in North Carolina.
We all know there's an anti.
Voter ID laws do not discriminate by their written law against any race.
But they do.
Affirmative
Please
action
stop.
policies-
Oh, God.
Affirmative action policies are explicitly racist, and not just against whites, but also against Asians.
I
So
mean, like, write a
they're
letter to the Supreme
totally-
Court, dude. I don't want to argue their case against you. I mean, like, in North Carolina, it was very, very clearly targeted towards black people. The state legislature requested data by racial breakdown in order to disallow the very specific dates that black people voted and the very specific types of ID that black people used to vote, and to close very specific black majority voting booths, right? I know that for people like you, for the enlightened centrists, if it's not there in the letter of the law, you don't think that it's racist, but for the rest of us that have to deal with the pragmatic implementation of policy in the real world, these things end up being pretty fucking racist.
Destiny, this little guy, you must hate.
All right, wait.
You're always
One
making
person at a time.
excuses. You're always making excuses. I like to say, let's hold everybody to the same standard. Let's have the same expectations of everybody. I think the people, not to go Dems are the real racists, but you know what, Destiny? You don't care about black people. In fact, I think you think less of black people because you read into their experience all these excuses. Oh, well, it was voter ID laws. Oh, well, it's explicitly anti-black. No. The truth of the matter is how much money has been dedicated to these programs for inner cities, for black youth, for blacks in STEM, for blacks in college, diversity quotas, and nothing's changed. So it's time to say, you know what? We are in the post-racial America. I grew up in a country where there was no institutional discrimination. It's time to say, look, everybody's got to play ball. Everybody's got to play by the same rules.
How do you explain studies where they take similar applications and they switch out a white name with a black name, and the guy has a 50% chance less of getting a call back? How do you explain something like that?
I can explain that easily because blacks and whites, there are differences in the representation and the statistics. For example, if you look at the crime statistics for 2016, you look at just about I think it's all measures of crime, and black people commit by far and away more crime than white people. And by the way, the proportions are virtually the same, whether it's rape, murder, whatever you want to divide it by.
So,
And
but wait,
then
before we get
people
into
are
crime
using
stats,
economy of
why did you
information.
pivot?
Why did I pivot?
Why is it
I
fair
don't
that if a
think-
black guy has the exact same application as a white person and his name is switched with a white person, he'll have twice the chance of getting hired?
And by the way, where does this happen? Where does this happen?
What?
If
It's one of
anything,
the most
opposite
popular
happens.
studies on institutional racism in the United
Sure,
States.
let's see this. What study? What study?
Hold on.
Yeah, can you watch the
Actually-
study? You want to
No,
leak?
it doesn't exist, Bob. Doesn't
Actually,
happen.
regarding that study, I have heard of it as well.
No,
but it's
everyone has
very-
heard of it. It's like one of the most off-cited
Destiny, I'm
things.
throwing you a bone. Just hold on a sec, okay? Right. But I think what's interesting regarding that study, if you look at what are the traditionally black names that they've chosen, they're actually, they're things like, Shaniqua, things like that. Black people can have names like Darren, like Wilson, things like that.
So if the
How
black
do you
person
think-
has the wrong name, it's okay to
No,
discriminate
hang on,
against them?
Hang on, I'm making a point, Destiny. How do you think a white person with a name like, I don't know, Billy Bob Thornton would do? Like, how do you think a white person with a name like, I don't know, Mary Sue, or like, I don't know, hillbilly redneck names? I think, I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist within individual hiring practices, but I also think there's an element of classism here that perhaps people are ignoring. Right, and it's not just like, oh, black versus white. It's also like, it's also a class thing. You can tell a lot
How
with the
can you
names.
take
There's-
white names, replace them with black names, and somehow extrapolate from
But
that it must be
But
class?
what is a white name versus a black name? Give me a black name, Destiny.
Like Tyrone or Jamal?
Whoa.
is
What are you, a white supremacist?
is Steven not a
Are you
black
Nazi?
name?
Not generally. Are we gonna sit here? And
Alright,
I love the dishonesty. We're gonna sit here and
people are
pretend that
not-
white people
people are
don't have
generally
certain
named-
names generally, and black people don't tend to have certain. How many white women do you know that are named Shaniqua or
Wow,
Letitia?
Steven, I believe in equality, okay? There's no differences.
Yeah, but you
between
also
people.
believe that somebody that goes to Washington High School is gonna have the same
No.
opportunities in life as somebody that goes to like
Steven.
St. Louis, the Pope, fucking the
Steven.
23rd.
I'm hearing a lot of problematic rhetoric coming out of you.
I
that
love
there's
the memery.
black
Whew,
and white
when we
names.
backed into
No,
a corner that we can't respond with.
Steven.
Better pull out our memes, boys.
It's problematic.
Does anyone
You're-
else here like Lake Hekistan?
I don't believe there is any such
Anyone
thing
else here
as a
like
black
Pee Pee
name.
the Frog,
All right,
guys?
I want to jump in here for 2 seconds.
Anyone else in
I
here
don't blame
short,
you.
boys?
Black name.
Anybody
Steven,
else
I
need
thought
to?
you were black. I
Anyone
thought
else
you
need
were
their
black.
booster seat
Come on,
here
guys,
to
we
stay
all
even in
know
this
that black guys
conversation?
aren't called Steven. Like, I mean, Destiny's right.
alright.
We can't
Remember
ask
earlier
that
when
while
Destiny
we're
said
Steven.
no black people have the name Steven? I remember when Destiny said that.
Sorry, I've let this go to shit. I hope you're enjoying this on your Sunday evening,
I'm
anyways,
fucking
guys.
loving it.
I do. I do want to mention though. I have a question about the name thing because this does happen in a lot of cases. What about in higher learning? You had that gentleman, and this is a story that many of us know about, easily Googleable, where he kept repeatedly entering his poetry to be accepted, to be published, to be published, to published, and he could not get it published until he changed his name to an Asian name. Because then he was suddenly within a criteria of like diversity hiring. So within the arts, within other fields, you certainly see this as well. And this is just a natural thing that exists in the world. It is certainly being pushed by leftist agendas who want to get rid of whites. And right now, our culture is currently pushing against any sort of agenda to against or being prejudiced towards minorities. That is not a popular trend in the culture at all. It's pushing the opposite way to be prejudiced towards whites, even if that is still happening to
So
an extent.
once again, your evidence for this is a single data point. Why?
You
No,
just
man, no.
cited
It's-
one single.
I cited one of the most comprehensive studies from the National Bureau of Economics Research called Are Emily and Greg More Employable Than Lakeisha and Jamal? The study is kind of old, but it has been one of the most comprehensive studies. They did thousands of applications on this to see whether or not it. What?
Okay, well then,
How old
Stephen,
is
let me cite the law. There's diversity hiring in Canada for all government jobs. If I'm a woman or someone who is black or Asian or whatever, I am more likely to get a job in the military or police force or in education. That is the freaking
What do you
law.
want?
So beyond just social prejudices, we have it as a legal prejudice against whites.
And
No,
also
nothing?
in the oh, yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah, Destiny, if you got an answer to that.
Well, I don't. I mean, the goal behind affirmative action policies is that usually they try to open up positions or they try to find ways to help groups that have been disproportionately impacted by past law. And generally, white people don't seem to be hurt by this very much. That's why we're not having a discussion right now about how all of the white communities are being destroyed and all of the whitehood or whatever white people are being thrown into poverty as a result of these horrible, atrocious affirmative action programs. Like you can cite me all the one-off things you want, or like, well, the law says this thing, but you can't find me these communities of white people that are being destroyed by criminal justice systems or are being destroyed by failing education systems or fucked up cities. Like you just can't find it.
I love how you say that it's the criminal justice system. Like black people commit crime, black people go to jail. It's the criminal justice system. No, maybe there's a culture of responsibility. And,
I mean, like,
and
if you look at
families-
reported rates for marijuana use, there are plenty of age groups. I think in every age group, except for like 2 or 3, like 5-year chunks, white people report higher use of marijuana than black people do. But black people are like twice as likely to be locked up for it.
that's because there's more violent crime. That's because there's more violent crime in black neighborhoods.
Okay,
you
so
wanna
the
know
way
why
that
they
you
get locked up for because the police have to be there. I don't know if you've ever been to Chicago, Stephen, but there's a lot of marijuana usage where I am in the suburbs. Not a lot of gang killings, not a lot of rape. You go a little bit east, and there's a lot of that stuff. It makes sense why the police goes over there. You can all day long. You want to pretend that at once there's no differences between people. We're all equal. They're so poor. Whatever. Blah blah blah. But at the same time, there's black names. At the same time, you can't have it all ways.
No, I don't want to have it always. You always try to present this as the most hyperbolic thing possible. Believe it or not, it is simultaneously possible to recognize that there are problems in the black community, some of them maybe even belonging to black people and black cultures themselves, while also recognizing that black people have disproportionately faced really fucked up things in their history in America that other white people haven't. You can simultaneously recognize both of these positions and be just fine.
What are some, Steve? And I'm just curious. What would you say are some black cultural problems? Name some for me.
Well, I mean, black people's
problems.
relationship to the police is pretty fucking dire at the moment, I would say, right?
Maybe
Well,
they
how do you
should
mean
stop
that?
doing crimes.
Oh, that was so
context?
enlightened, dude.
From
Just stop
police
doing
to black
crimes,
people, or
dude.
from black people to the police?
What?
I said in what context? We were talking like black cultural problems. I just want to hear you name a few. Do you mean their relationship with the police, as in the police are treating them badly, or black people are responding badly to the police?
I would say it's probably a combination of both. But a lot of this roots from the problems of police legitimately fucking up black people and earlier in the 50s and 60s and shit, right? A lot of culture is reactionary to other problems.
That's just goofy, man. Nobody's 20 years old today knows police brutality from the 1950s.
No, but they're literal parents and grandparents do, dude.
Racism that doesn't excuse. And by the way, it's not like it's just like communities here that haven't been working. Certain people have been failing for thousands of years, and to write that off is like, oh well, it's just because they haven't been given enough money or programs. I think is a little bit ridiculous. You know, it's kind of
that's ridiculous. But paying them all $1,000 to ship them back to Africa, that's a very realistic problem right there.
Talking about that.
Okay.
Who's talking about shipping them back to Africa?
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Wait, no, Steve, who raised that point? I didn't hear that once during this stream.
Yeah, right.
Isn't that part of the big meme for you building your white ethno state? Is you have to ship some of these people back to the country? Wait, so how do you deal with it right now? How do you deal with all the all those evil brown and black people in the United States right now?
Dealing with what are you talking about, wacky Steve?
You want a white super? I'm sorry, I
people.
thought you mentioned a white supermajority of the United States earlier. Did you not?
Yeah, by raising birth rates, by having families again.
So how do you keep
healthy
Hispanic and
replacement
black people from having kids and make white people have more kids?
Talking about
I'm
that.
asking how you do it.
Nobody's
No, I want
talking
you to
about
talk
this,
about it.
Steven.
How do you do it? How do you fix it?
We're not trying to stop people from having babies. We want the majority in the country to start having kids again, and it's because their birth rate is so low that their population hasn't been maintained. You think, by the way, Stephen, do you think it's been like an accident that the population of whites in the country went from 90% to 67% in 50 years? You think that was an accident?
It was,
And
yeah.
for us,
It kind of was, yeah,
want
sure.
to move in the opposite direction, we're villains for that. You're the ones that want to push this artificial transformation, unnatural transformation of our country.
It's very natural.
Have to justify
What?
ending that.
It's insanely natural. It's just immigration.
let in
You're the one
millions
who's
of
talking
people?
about
There is
arbitrarily
nothing
restricting certain people to coming to the country. You're the definition of arbitrary.
It's hardly arbitrary to say the people from broken non-states, from failed states, shouldn't come into our country. Hey, Syria, you can't come in. You're making that arbitrary when 20% of their people support ISIS? I don't think so.
I mean, Syria is a refugee case. Do you want to talk about refugees or immigrants, or do you just mix all these groups together?
Well, okay, let's take Mexico for example, where south of certain districts it's lawless. You have no government. The cartels run the country. So yeah, I mean, you could take Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Africa.
What legislation or policies? What legislation or policies are Mexicans pushing in the United States that are causing it to turn into Mexico?
All right, just
the
one.
1965 immigration.
What is 1965? No, I want to know what policies Mexicans have come to the United States and proposed and supported that are turning us into Mexico.
It's not Mexicans doing it. It's a certain group of rootless transnational elites. The Hart-Celler Act, which pushed certain provisions, it eliminated the national origins quota. It said that it allowed chain migration so that people that are families of immigrants can come here. That was deliberate. And again, you put the burden of proof on us to end your program to transform our country.
Wait, this wasn't your program. This wasn't our program.
Right,
This was
guys.
okay.
The white men have taken over the chat. This is absolutely disgusting. It is bigoted. I've had enough of white men running this stream. So we are going to bring in some minority voices for about 2 seconds here. Theron, did you want to jump in and comment on any of the autistic screeching you've heard for the last 30 minutes?
Well, every time I have a moment to jump in to comment on a topic, we've already moved on to another topic. I still have some thoughts on the "it's okay to be white" thing. So
that's a while ago.
I know.
That's long past.
I know.
Missed that train.
You guys are so heated, and I guess I'm not assertive enough to just jump in and say everyone shut up. But is it worth going back on that? Otherwise, we can just carry on, and I'll just comment on something if I have a thought on any new.
No.
I'm okay with going
Bring
back.
up a new point. Bring up something new. Yeah.
Oh, something completely new.
Oh, whatever you want. Whatever you want. Everyone. This is a diverse stream. Everyone is allowed to bring in new opinions. Everyone's allowed to talk.
No, I wanted to comment on the "it's okay to be white" thing because it dovetails into a larger point that I have. So that was put up on university campuses, right?
Yes, all over the place.
Okay, well, thing is that we all know that anti-white sentiments are prevailing on campus. I mean, that is just obvious. So I think that makes a lot of sense to put stuff like that, like it's okay to be white signs up on university campuses. And I think the thing with the mainstream media and leftists is that they just immediately interpret as the worst possible interpretation of, oh, this is Nazi propaganda. And that doesn't mean that there couldn't be subtext ever. Certainly there could be some subtext, but I still think it's still important to employ the principle of charity and to interpret statements, to use the best plausible interpretation of a statement or argument when conversing with someone else. And that's a problem on both sides. I think that's a problem with the right and a problem with the left when dealing with each other, is that they don't employ the principle of charity towards one
Right.
another.
So,
Yeah.
like Nick and
Same.
Steven, everything is translated in the worst possible
Yes.
translation of the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow, English, spaghetti. That's my second language. I'm
So
just not even
for example, when Stephen said black names, obviously he didn't mean names that are inherently black. Obviously, he meant names that are predominantly associated or are mostly assigned to people who are black. That is the most reasonable, the best, strongest plausible interpretation. So that's not fair, right? That is not charitable. And then I'm sure Steve said a bunch of things towards Nick that was not really very charitable towards Nick, though I can't think of one right now.
Well, this is the nature of debate these days. It's funny, it's entertaining, and it is helpful to debate. And when the opponent in a debate is not charitable with you, why be charitable with them is what it ultimately comes down to. It's not necessarily the most radical, centrist, most reasonable way of approaching things, but it is the world we live in, and it is the state of debate that we are in now. It's gotten to extremes where, of course, you have, for example, the Antifa holding up that we support pedos, no pedo bashing thing, where they literally dropped that immediately after, according to some articles, and interpreting that the wrong way has really destroyed any sort of argument or actually attacking their actual points. But, I mean, with the current way that the left is treating the right, it is just as devolved. How do we fix this, guys? Let's end this stream on a nice point. Where is some common ground that you lads can find? Let's go to Steven and Nick, since you guys have been at each other's throats. Any common ground you can find?
People like Steven need to be thrown in jail, okay? These subversives. Well, no,
I'm not even Jewish, dude. Why would you say that? Fuck.
The problem. Why are you reading into it? You hear like people ruling the country, and then you think Jew? Are you
The
anti-Semitic?
transnational. I know, dude. I watched all the Mouthy Buddha videos. I know who those transnationalist elites are. I got my eyes on them,
That went
dude.
well.
You are an anti-Semite, okay? But here's where we can find.
I'm just a realist, dude.
Here's where we can find some common ground. People like Steven have to be held responsible for the fact that they are pushing policies that are transformative, and the natural order continues to be perverted. And I think if we could argue from that axiom, where Steven has to justify millions of people coming here, instead of me having to justify why we don't take millions of people, I think that's a productive way to change the conversation, because it happens to be the reality of the situation.
Can I just jump in?
Sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I need to take issue. I need to take issue with Nick's constant use of the term natural order, because I think it's a complete misnomer. I think it's maybe in your mind religious order or traditional order or cultural order. It's not natural order. I don't think you understand nature and biodiversity if you want to equate natural order with whatever you're talking about, because nature is actually allows for a lot of variation. And of
Not that
course
kind
there
of
are
variation.
of course there are trends. Of course there are trends. Of course women are on average predisposed to want to have children, but that doesn't mean that nature doesn't allow for some women who are predisposed to probably hate to have children and would probably be better off not having children. This whole idea that there is this order ordained by nature, in your case God, onto humans is just fallacious. The reality of the situation is that nature is constantly in flux, that the environment is constantly in flux, and that we're constantly adapting. So the natural order is constantly changing. It's just religious order. Please stop equating your understanding of what humans should be with nature.
Well, you're one to lecture on naturalism, but the natural order of things, we all understand what that means. And up until very recently, we all understood what that means. Until
What
very
are you talking about? You're someone to talk.
Because
Yeah,
you're
well,
a trans
you are
degenerate,
living
is
an
what he's saying.
alternative
Because you're a
lifestyle. You are living
degenerate.
a lifestyle. You are making choices that are unnatural. And
No.
that's not me saying that. That's not. That is
Can you
God
please,
saying that.
no. No, please. Absolutely. That's complete bullshit.
Okay.
The idea that nature doesn't allow for variation.
Where do you see gender reassignment surgeries in the animal kingdom? Where do you see like little kangaroos operating on each
Can we
other?
not make this about me?
Well,
Like,
I mean, because
you're someone to talk about
obviously-
this.
Hey,
No,
you brought
that's
yourself
an ad
into
hominem.
it. You
That's
brought
an ad
yourself.
hominem.
Oh, okay.
Well,
You
I was
can keep
talking about
shouting
your
that, but
ideas. I was talking about your ideas,
obviously-
and then you made it about my gender.
Well, we know why you take issue with this natural order.
No,
we know
I'm
why
not.
this.
I'm not talking about the whole trans thing. I'm relating this to like women wanting to or not wanting to have kids.
Well,
I wasn't
then
even
in that
thinking about
case,
it.
well, but the
That's
exception.
just like that is just perfect example of an ad hominem.
Fair enough. But then, with regard to women, the exception proves the rule. Of course, you can have women that are working. Of course, you have anomalies. Catherine the Great, Joan of Arc, Elizabeth, Victoria. We can have exceptions, but the exceptions prove the rule. I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, you wouldn't say, for example, that because you have an apple.
Yes. Well,
that
that's
by
why
some
I'm
freak
saying.
example-
but-
by some freak example, an apple is blue. You wouldn't say that apples come in
But
red,
that's
green,
why I'm
and
saying
blue.
that natural order allows for variation. You just proved my point. You
No, but-
have
but
an
no,
idea
no.
in your mind of religious order. You have an idea in
but
your mind of
that's-
cultural
Well, I mean,
order.
I don't see eye to eye with Nick on everything, but I don't think it's necessarily him inserting religion into this to say that the natural order is for people to be forming pair bonds and having children.
No,
Even
it-
if we accept that if
Mm.
some people, individuals may not want to do that, it is undisputably the natural order for people to
No,
make,
you're talking.
have children and raise
You guys
them.
are talking about two different things. You're talking about
Yeah.
the natural order as exists as a scientific fact. Nick is asserting that it is a philosophical ought. These are two gaps that most
Well, I mean,
people
it's
generally.
both.
No,
Both.
it's not. It's not
It's
both.
both.
It's not
Both.
both.
Sure
Unless
it
you're
is.
Sam Harris, it's not both. You cannot bridge the fact that some things exist in the world of science and they all of a sudden become biological imperatives. We spend plenty of time in our daily lives. We are talking to each other on video screens using computers to communicate with one another, okay? We do a lot of things that can't be directly tied to our biological imperatives. Generally.
That's ridiculous.
Right, but that
But
doesn't.
it's not.
that
Well, I
doesn't
mean, if you don't believe. Do you hunt for your food, Nick? Have you gone out hunting recently?
Of course, it's different. to say
Exactly,
that
you
we
don't.
use
So you do not
technology.
believe in your.
No. But in principle, well, and we can talk about Ted Kaczynski and if we should even be doing all of this. But besides the point, we're using tools. But the fundamental reality, the
What, do you use
principles that
tools
govern
to
human
kill your
behavior do
food?
not change. Well, this is a tool. The market process, the civilization can be considered a sociological tool, of course. I mean, that's a fallacious argument that I don't think anybody thinks is relevant to the conversation. You know, to equate anarcho-primitivism to using your biological limitations to govern your decision making. You don't think anybody equates those two except
No.
for you.
Well,
Which are
nobody
arguing that.
nobody in
difference.
society
Here's
that
the
talks about
difference.
morals or
All right,
ethics
all
or.
right, all right. You two are going to take over the stream again, so I'm going to give Theron a chance to respond, and then Roaming a chance to respond.
Here's the difference. Someone who is naturally, so a woman who is naturally
Full
predisposed
bar
not
battery.
to want to have children and probably not be a good mother and probably someone who shouldn't have children. She's not someone who goes against the natural order. She is someone who is part of the natural order as a variation on that order. There's a difference between being an exception to the rule and going against the rule, and this idea of intentionality, and that's where natural order, that's where this religious thinking comes in, and where the moralistic argumentation comes
Okay.
in. That is exactly what Nick is talking about.
I think
He's
the
using,
problem is
he's
pretty
using
obvious.
nature. He's using nature to explain his religiosity, and I don't agree with that. Even if I consider myself a traditionalist in many ways, and I think that our society should be a lot more traditional in many ways, I'm not going to use natural order to explain my point of view.
Well, no
because
one
it's
does.
just-
Okay,
Except for
here we
Nick.
go. Here we go. I think I can identify the problem, and the problem here seems to be semantics. It seems to be that, of course, Theron, you are right. Variations are part of the natural order, technically speaking. However, when we're speaking on just a general term of naturally, this is typically what happens. Generally speaking, I understand what Nick's point is, and generally speaking, I understand what Roaming Millennial's point is. But technically speaking, you are correct.
But
This
that's
is
not
an
just the
argument over
technicality.
semantics. This is an
Not just
argument
the
over semantics,
technicality.
though.
This is not a
No, no, it's
semantics
not
argument. This is an
it's
argument
not
of
just the
philosophy.
technicality, because there's a very, very, very important difference in meaning when you say someone is an exception to the natural order and someone is going against the natural order or the ordained word of God. There's a difference between just existing as a woman who just is naturally predisposed not to want to have children, and a woman who is sinning against the word of God because she doesn't want to have children.
Well, I mean, I don't think Nick has said that in this stream, that people are sinning against the word of God if they don't.
Well,
choose to have
Didn't Nick
kids.
advocate
I'm
for
talking about
conversion therapy for
intentionality here.
transgenders?
I'm talking about intention.
Right, but I think when we think
And
about
you can't ascribe intention onto nature. You can't describe your
Yeah, you can.
morality onto nature.
Sure you can. Yes.
No,
this
you
is
can't.
essentially a moral.
If you
Natural
read it,
selection
of
does
course
not
you
have
can.
intention.
Of
Natural
course you
selection
can.
does not have intention.
Well, the
There's no
intention,
believe in
we're
that, if you
talking about
believe in that, by the
reproduction, and
way.
the intention of reproduction is to have children.
But that's not how we use it in society today. Everybody uses contraception. Even you don't
Yeah,
believe that.
but we
Which is
are
a
talking
disaster.
specifically about
Huh.
families, or at least that's what my impression was when we're talking about women having families and having children. Maybe I've lost sight of the conversation, though. Totally possible.
Yeah, I think I might be a little lost.
So
on this
what
one,
Theron
to
is,
be honest.
the difference between what these two are arguing, I think, okay, if I can try to understand Nick's point of view, is Nick says that there is a certain order to the natural world, that this order is something that can be factually and scientifically observed, and that we should do our best to preserve that order in society. That's essentially Nick's argument, right? Is that a fair summary of your point?
It is natural, societal, and cosmic, the order I'm talking about. So you say that it's philosophical and it's also biological. It's all part of a coherent system.
But that's just bullshit because the natural order can
not an
change.
argument.
In a thousand years,
No.
of course.
So the problem is that Nick is taking his.
The environment is constantly changing, and we are constantly adapting to a constantly changing environment. So in a million years' time, what is the natural order then? Or the cosmic order then is completely different from what it is now. This idea that it's this platonic ideal and eternally stable thing is completely religious.
Of course it's eternal. Of course, and it's been true
No,
for the
it's
past.
not. It's
Of course
not
it is.
completely eternal.
Are you gonna let me finish, babe? Okay, look, of course it's eternal. Men and women are not in flux biologically. Like maybe in a million years, and we'll have to ask our future selves in a million years if the biology has changed. But as it stands, men and women still have different brain chemistry. As it stands, men and women still have different biology, and biology.
Of course they do, and I agree with you.
And Steven believes in comparative advantage only insofar as it extends to the marketplace. He doesn't believe in comparative advantage when it comes to the fact that women are more suited to rearing and raising children, and men
I
more
totally
suited to
believe
hunting,
that.
building things.
I totally believe that.
Soldiers.
I think that if we had a 100% equal society where there was no pressure on any sides whatsoever, I think that you would see women gravitate towards some jobs more than men. I totally 100% believe that.
No, they would gravitate towards the home. That would be the job they gravitate.
Okay, I'm sorry, because in your world, no woman ever wants to work any job ever. Okay, but
No, that's
even
not,
in the marketplace. In the marketplace, if women could still work in the world where they're allowed to choose jobs, that women would probably gravitate towards some things more than others. The problem is that what Nick is trying to do is Nick is taking his observation of the natural order and he's trying to extrapolate a system of morals from that. But in society, we generally don't do this. If we have a person who is like, say we have somebody that's disabled, right? Somebody in a wheelchair. We don't typically say, well, naturally speaking, this is a person that needs to die. We shouldn't be providing medical resources for them. We shouldn't be providing food for them because naturally speaking, somebody that can't
We
walk.
also wouldn't be saying that person is going against the natural
Exactly.
order,
We wouldn't
right?
say that this
Right,
person.
but I mean,
Wait.
to address that, we also, to be fair, wouldn't say that that person is completely normal. It's very clear that they have a disability. And if I can bring this back to, the whole debate about, women and having children, it is totally fine if an individual woman doesn't want to have children and wants to focus on a career or whatever. She just doesn't want children for whatever reason.
I guess
that doesn't mean that.
But can you
Sorry, go ahead.
acknowledge the difference? Or sorry, go on.
I guess my point is that I feel like variation and the acknowledgement of human variation is slowly getting lost in this
Her voice
natural
is
order
killing me.
conversation because you have to acknowledge that variation, natural variation, and biodiversity is part of the conversation.
The difference is
diversity, of course, but you talk about men and women, and you talk about Aristotle's four causes. Let's talk about Aristotle's.
Aristotle?
Aristotle's four causes is the final cause. directed towards a particular end, and human beings are directed towards a particular end. Why do we have reproductive appendages? Hint, it's in the name. It's not for
reproductive appendages.
Cosmopolitan magazine sex positions. It's so that you can continue species. It's so that you can, after you get married, have lots of children, and then they take care of you.
Marriage? Do you think monogamy is part of the natural order? Monogamy is part of the natural order?
Of course.
Why are men sexually attracted? Why are men sexually attracted to other women then after they're married?
That has nothing to do with it.
What do you mean? That's a perfectly natural biological function.
Well, here, I mean, if it was biological, women would have multiple orifices for multiple partners, but that's just not a partner. Some evolution. Wait, no, hold on. I'm curious because biologically speaking, a man and a woman can be married, and that man can still feel intense sexual attraction for other people. So why would that be unnatural to you? Shouldn't men naturally be polyamorous? No, because again, it's a difference between men having certain sexual chemistry, and the reason for that is because there are, women are the selectors in terms of who carries on the genes. Women.
You're not answering my question.
I don't.
Answer his fucking question.
He absolutely was.
In the process of making my
He's making it now. He's telling you he's making it now.
Look, but the thing,
Ladies, men, everyone, let's. I need to wrap this stream up soon. As fun as this has been, I found this absolutely entertaining for my Sunday night. But I will take some final statements, some final points from everyone. I apologize for cutting you off right there. I think there were about somehow 20 people talking at once, despite there only being 6 people in here. So, does anyone want to make any final statements, final points to wrap up this hilarity?
Yeah, I'd love to, if I can have a minute.
Excellent. Go ahead.
We're a little short on time, so keep it fast.
I will. I just wanted to ask the little guy, are you still suing girls on the internet?
Ooh, I actually am not able to talk about that publicly at the moment. I'm sorry, but you're
suing somebody.
I can't speak about that
really?
under advice of counsel. I'm not supposed to talk about that right now. I'm sorry.
You can't legally speak about.
I can't. I'm not. I shouldn't. I really shouldn't. I really shouldn't. I'm sorry.
Oh, that is sad. That is fucking sad. The other thing I wanted to ask you too, that that I've got a short minute here. Are you ever going to pay that charity money you owe, or are you going to just be a snake?
Well, somebody said that I called people racial slurs in StarCraft 2, and that image was never produced.
What I'm talking about.
That image. Wait, what other thing was talked about?
You wanted somebody to quote you. You said, "If you can find me saying this, I'll pay $1,000."
Yeah.
Immunity bans.
Like the N-word in StarCraft or whatever.
From
Not the StarCraft thing.
Oh, well,
immunity to what?
I don't remember this.
Immunity?
He found the quote.
What's that?
And he asked you to donate that money to a British charity for midgets.
Oh shit.
Immunity? Is that magic? I don't even know what that is. What is immunity?
I guess you
Maybe
do.
you better go ahead and shoot me that tweet again, and I'll look into it, buddy. Okay?
You need to pay what you owe.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, if you have money to
I remember this.
sue girls on the internet, you should have the money to pay.
Oh, I never
them.
said I was doing any of that. Oof.
You said advice of
Was this
counsel,
the
you can't
N-word
talk
thing?
about it.
That's
No,
all.
this was
Yeah,
the
I
N-word.
can't really say. I can't. Yeah,
I'm not
can't talk
talking
about it. I'm
about
really
that.
sorry. I wish I could.
Yes, to ignore status effects. Making
I'm
videos.
talking about the thing where he went off on some black chick and called her an Uncle Tom.
Oh, I remember that.
yeah,
That was
Patty.
funny stuff. Yeah.
Good old
That's
Patty.
good stuff, Destiny. Yeah. Was that the same one that you tweeted out the KKK crucifix burning picture?
No, that was actually to a black nationalist, but yeah, that was a pretty good tweet too. I like that one.
That's good stuff.
I liked it. You're the Gamergate guy, right? I thought you said we shouldn't be offended by this kind of stuff, or does it just bother you when I say it because we disagree politically?
No, I fucking love it. I wish you did more stuff like that.
Oh, well, there you go. I try to, dude. Keep an eye on my chat. I'm a pretty edgy dude.
I want you to be more edgy.
Okay, I
We
try.
can both wear Kekistani shirts.
I'm a little too old for that. I hit my
You wanna do
20s
that? We
like
go
almost a
Shadowley
decade
on
ago. I don't know if I
Black
really want to associate with the Kekistani dudes, but you know, my kid is actually he's almost 7 years old. Maybe in like a couple years he'll be old enough for the Kekistani stuff. I'll get him a shirt, all right?
Have you had the big conversation with him yet about whether it's morally right to fuck him?
It's pretty hard for me to have big conversations about anything, my dude.
Oh boy. Well, to wrap it up, I mean, look, we can argue back and forth about the data. We can look at the data all we want.
The data.
We all know it. The natural order must prevail, and I will bludgeon women back into the home, rhetorically speaking, with the Holy Bible if I have to, and I will, rhetorically. And so I'll leave it at that. I'm a crusader for women and blacks and Jewish people. I want them to succeed and be happy, and that's my fight. I'm a social justice warrior.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much for that. Anyone else like to wrap this up with some kind comments?
I just kind of like what I was trying to say to Theron is that whenever I talk about, marriage and family and things like that, very often people get the sense that you're condemning the morality of people who choose to go against you. But what I would like to see is a culture where, for university, for example, I think we all kind of generally agree that university is a good choice to make, but that doesn't mean someone who chooses not to go to university is a bad or immoral person. That's what I would like to see regarding marriage and the family, that we all recognize it as universal good, but that we don't demonize people if their personal circumstances don't point toward that way. And I think there is something to be said about, judge not lest you be judged. Just saying, Nick.
No, I will. I will judge them. I will judge them until Christ himself sits at the right hand of the Father and judges them. No, I'm joking.
Oh my God.
It's true, but it's true. I mean, it's a moral good too, and I don't judge people if they're in a personal circumstance where they have to work. But I just think societally, it's just better for everybody. I don't know why everybody wants to live in rebellion against what they know is natural. That's why people get so defensive, because they know they're living in rebellion.
Nick, your sweater is lovely, but gotta stop hogging the cam. Anything from Steven, no bullshit, or Theron? Anything burning in your gut that you gotta get out?
I'm just kind of curious. I just have one comment, or actually just one question. Or Theron can go first if you wanted to, or roaming.
No, go ahead, go Showboat.
Oh, I was just curious, Lauren. I'm curious for you because it's always hard to pin down your beliefs because you like to dance the line so much. Do you think that trans people are unnatural degenerates? Yeah, is that a yes or no? I'm curious.
People are unnatural degenerates.
Are trans people unnatural degenerates?
I wouldn't say degenerate.
That's all I needed. That's all I wanted to know. That's all I wanted to know.
No, I don't believe in the idea that you can change your gender. No.
Okay. That's all I wanted.
No.
Well, I'll go ahead and chime in there on that awkward moment. First of all, I love the fact that Brightside Bob or Medicare's picture's been up for like the last half hour on the stream. That's pretty awesome. Those three gay guys are really rocking out. Thank you everyone for coming on, and thanks Lauren for inviting me. Last thing I'll say is Richard Spencer watches my videos. He tweets them. MAGA 2020. It's okay to be white.
What? Okay. All right. Well, this was the worst, guys. Thank you so much. This started out so civil. It had so much promise. Then
I haven't dumped in yet. Are you signing?
All right. You get 1 second. You get 1 minute. I just wanna go drink wine and cry about not having children.
I was gonna say, like, it's kind of funny to me because, like, which one of you ladies which one of any of you are engaged?
Ooh. Those biological imperatives.
This is getting real personal. This stream
real
is
personal after grilling her on her
personal,
unnatural
guys.
degeneracy. Now it's personal.
I'm just curious because, like, I'm engaged. I'm soon to get married, and I'm probably gonna have children in the next 2 years. This degenerate that I am, I guess that I'm just a living example of the fact that we all have some natural variation in us. That there's not like this platonic ideal of what people should be in every point in time until the end of time. That someone can have this variation here but still satisfy all the other criteria of the natural order. I can't wait to be a mother, and I think I'll be a great mother. And fuck you, Nick.
Can I just a quick comment? I appreciate the conversation. I really do. I love all of you. Even Nick, except for Mr. Medicare. I hate you. And no bullshit. But Lauren, yeah. Lauren, Nick, and roaming even maybe. Yeah, I appreciate the conversation. I do enjoy talking to you guys.
I also want to apologize. I also want to apologize to roaming millennial for going so hard and heated up with you because I actually really like you and I think you're really cool. Even if I'm like frustrated about a few things, and I'm sorry about that.
No worries. It's spicy conversation. Anytime you guys want to talk again, I would be down. Thanks for having us, Lord.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. Thank you for having
me. Thanks, buddy.
Thank you for the wonderful awkward video on my channel. This is just wow. And thank you to the chat for partaking. This had so much promise, but I hope it was entertaining. You came on this adventure with us, this complete and utter shit show of a live stream. Be sure to check out ContraPoints, Theron Meyer, Mr. Mediocre, No Bullshit, Destiny, Roaming Millennial, and Nick Fuentes on their own channels. They all had their own unique thing to contribute to this that made it entertaining. As for the rest of you, I hope you all have a wonderful Saturday night. I'm probably never going to do this again, so savor this while you can. Cheers, everyone. Good night.
All right, have fun, guys.
Wow, that was the worst. Thank you so much, guys.
think we did okay, right? Do you think we did okay-ish? I noticed I had a lot of centrists there, defending my point.
River jelly. The fuck?
Thanks for trying.
Just throw a llama?
Now 5,000 of us are dumber and have brain cancer. The feels.
It's just garbage.
Destiny, I don't even know how you can have any shred of composure during these conversations. Keep it up, buddy. Chat, you guys are hilarious. Less than 3 GODSTINY, less than 3.
Fuck is that?
I am peak liberal of 2017, according to this.
Easy as 1v1
4chan,
your
this
life,
Croatian 4chan poster. Wow.
GODSTINY.
Destiny hits liberalism pretty close to the center. Thanks. Biological imperative.
To accuse you of being...
And I'll talk about them after this, right? This is where I always point to, like, there are problems that exist. Anytime I hear anywhere, opinions on is one of the big...
Enough of that shit. Nick Fuentes?
Did you know you can AFK Bloods and Zaya whilst learning to code in Python? Go to boot.dev.
I'm curious if you agree with this, Evan.
Boot,
In America, Mexican immigrants face great challenges, often with no knowledge of the English language and with little formal education. Many Mexican immigrants are compelled to accept low-wage manual labor jobs and are frequently exploited by middlemen who act as intermediaries between them and the prospective employers. Many sought housing in the older sections of the large cities where they settled, and they became known as Little Mexicos, frequently in overcrowded, substandard tenements which were often dimly lit with poor heating and ventilation. Do you think this is an okay summary of Mexicans in the United States today?
Yes.
Okay, well, I just replaced the word Mexico. I replaced the word Italian with Mexican. These were Italians in the 1900s.
Wow. Yeah, and again, and here's the...
What's
again,
the okay, Nick, let's hear it. Slippery Nick. Go ahead, Slippery Nick.
Got him.
Good evening, everybody who are watching America First. My name is Nicholas J. Fuentes, and we have a great show for you tonight, a very exciting debate between myself and Stephen Bonnell, better known as Destiny. And hang on, let me check. My volume's a little bit high here. So, Destiny, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited. So, for the audience that is not aware, we had a debate, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, on the subject of immigration. It was a long one. It was a 2-hour debate. I thought it was relatively civil. I thought it was relatively reasonable. Got a little bit ugly online, as it tends to do a little bit later, but you requested to come back on the show and discuss it. Obviously, you believe there is some unfinished business here, so I'll give you the floor right out of the gate. Let's hear it. Let's hear your case. Let's hear the rematch, the redress of the first debate.
Sure. So basically, I kind of wanted to just go over more or less what we talked about last time, except a little bit more in depth in each of your arguments. The way that I kind of envision this happening is I'm going to try to restate what I believe your argument is as fairly as possible. You tell me if you agree with it, and then I'll bring up a challenge to it, and then you can kind of tell me if you think it's legitimate or not. It's pretty much all I wanted to do.
Sounds good.
All right, you want to dive right into it then?
Tomato melon.
All right, so I think I had like 8 or 9 different points that I kind of broke your argument up into. So the first one that we started off with last time, I believe it was the will of the people.
Tomato.
This is my summary of your argument. You can tell me if this is fair or not, or if you would amend it. The will of the American people was not represented when Congress voted on the 1965 Hart-Celler Act. This immigration reform fundamentally changed the composition of America, and most people would have been opposed to that had that information been made public. One may go as far as to say that this move was actually subversive and that the will of the people was intentionally betrayed.
Tomato melon.
Yes, agreed. 100%.
Gotcha. So I did a lot of digging around for this because I was just kind of curious if this was actually true or not, and I guess not much to my surprise. I really couldn't find any evidence of this at all. I looked at some polling data at the time. I guess so. Basically, my counter argument was that the composition of America
Tomato and
changed, but I don't think there was
melon.
any sort of subversive way to
What
do
are
it.
you?
I
Tomato
think
or
it just
melon
kind of happened
feeds.
accidentally. I don't think anybody actually knew how much the composition of America would change in regards to the Hart-Celler Act passing. If I say anything you disagree with, feel free to stop me. So I have a couple of polls, one done by Harris and one done by Gallup, and both of them show
What the
pretty
fuck
much
is
the
this
same
old man
thing.
doing?
70%
Oh.
of Americans at the time the Hart-Celler Act was passed were actually in favor of judging an immigrant on some characteristic
Tomato
that
and melon
wasn't related
seed.
to their national origin. So only 3 out of 10 Americans, or 30% of Americans, were in favor of maintaining that very strict "where does the immigrant come from" quota as part of the immigration thing. As I mentioned before, when we talked about this last time, the bill actually had widespread bipartisan support. 74% of Democrats and 85% of Republicans supported this bill. And even when efforts were made to appease, I will use a loaded word, to appease some of the more racist lawmakers, such as the Dixiecrats, even when efforts were made to appease these guys eventually hopped on and voted for it, and they didn't see any backlash from any of their constituents later on in any of their political lives. So I guess my question
wait,
when I
what
kind of
is
look at
this?
this is, how can you honestly say that you believe that the will of the American people wasn't represented when both parts of
I
both
think
halves
you
of
want
Congress, the
something.
Republican and the Democrat half, and all of the people at the time
Oh, I gotta remember, I still have so many quests to do.
Sure. Well, I think I agreed with the data. You know, nothing wrong with the data. The problem is I don't think the data contradicts my claim, and I think your summary was a little bit off. You say that 70% from that Gallup poll, or a little bit more than 70%, said that they wanted to judge immigrants on something other than national origin. I don't think that's quite the same as the particular provisions in the Hart-Celler Act, which were to completely eliminate the national origins quota and additionally to eliminate any kind of restrictions on the amount of immigration. So those two things I don't think are the same. To compare those two provisions, which is to not limit people by national origin and to not limit the number of people, is not quite the same as saying we should judge people based on something other than national origin, and 73% say that. You know, we know a lot of people pay lip service to this idea of all men are created equal and so on, but in practice, rarely I think do people agree with that in pragmatism in their daily life. So that's on the first hand. On the second hand, I agree with you. There is no evidence that this was a conspiracy.
It's money.
And I said we can speculate that congressmen might have had a better idea of the transformative effect than the regular person. That's what I said. And I said maybe there is a conspiracy.
I need rabbit's foot.
Like the
Where the fuck do you get rabbit's foot?
Plan in Europe, which wanted to transform that continent in a similar fashion. So I said purely speculatively that it was conspiracy. But regardless, I said the problem was that you had a transformative act like this that nobody really knew about, or people don't know about now. I mean, you yourself said in the first debate that you hadn't heard of this.
They can get something at the store?
My problem was, at no point in a major election, at no point in a major presidential debate, in a major midterm election, was mass immigration. Like there was an election where mass immigration, it was a referendum on mass immigration, and there should have been something like that. So I concede to you, yes, you're right.
Random.
That it had widespread bipartisan support in the Congress, but rarely do I think the representatives in Congress are totally representative of the will of the people. And I think if you really are, and again, this is a major important thing happening, it should have been a referendum in an election. It should have been a major issue, not an act of Congress. So, I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, but I totally disagree. Firstly, because we usually don't vote by these kinds of issues by referendum in the United States. It's just not the kind of government we run. I guess primarily you keep going back to this. It seems like you're kind of trying to weasel in that, like, well, people didn't really think this thing, but you don't really have any polling data or anything whatsoever to support that view. That's just your
You should.
Right? Do you admit that?
Yeah,
Give me
no, I think it's a personal belief that's based
I
on
don't want to waste my money on that. Yeah.
Okay, well, here, I mean, you have one poll to suggest.
2 polls.
The people, okay, you have 2 polls to suggest. Well, what's the second poll? I only heard the first.
It's a Harris poll. It was done in 1965, and then a 1965 Gallup poll as well. So both of them were done at the time. Very relevant, very highly repudiated.
But the same data, essentially. I mean, different polls, but the same result, correct? That people said we should judge.
Yeah, which goes to show that the results are probably accurate, yeah?
Yeah, right. Yeah, and of course, I concede the data. But again, you have these 2 polls, and
we have the mood of the time of the 1960s. I mean, do you think, and I'm asking you this in an honest way, and please be intellectually honest, do you think that if people could look at this
How
policy
long
and
does
were
it take
told
for
the
these to
actual results
fucking...
of it, if they were given like a projection of what would happen in the 80s and the 90s of
Crystallarium.
that you would have massive influxes of immigration from Mexico and Asia, do you think that the people of 1965, when you had the KKK marching through Skokie, Illinois, when you had the Civil Rights Act that was opposed by politicians, you had people running on the platform of segregation now, segregation forever, do you think that people would have been for that?
Maybe, maybe not, but that's a fundamentally different question.
Okay, but see, you say maybe, maybe not, but I think you're being a little bit intellectually dishonest.
So if we look at something like a war, if somebody would have voted in favor of the Iraq War or not against the Iraq War, or whatever, you can't really ask.
5 in-game days.
Do you think the will of the people is represented? It's just a non sequitur.
But that's different.
But no, it's absolutely the same. It's absolutely the same.
No, of course it's not, because you cannot predict. War intrinsically is a chaotic event. I mean, that's Bismarck. You roll the iron dice. With immigration, when you put in place certain policies, they have projections based on how these things turn out.
Yeah, and actually, so we can talk specifically about one of these projections. So, in an effort to appease conservative lawmakers like the Dixiecrats, there's a guy called Michael.
Dixiecrats, don't put diamonds in crystallarium.
This was like an example of a politician that was very much against this bill because he thought that it was going to transform the demographics of America, much like you. As a result of people like that, of the more racist, anti-civil rights people, they actually made that family member provision one of the most important parts of the bill itself. So that idea that you can bring over family members, that actually became the highest ranking part of that bill in an effort to appease those people. So the people that were most ideologically aligned to you ended up advocating for the number one part of the bill that caused so much of this immigration to happen. That people like you would be opposed to. I think that points pretty concretely that it was kind of an accident, that the congressman didn't actually know how it would turn out, unless you have any evidence to the contrary that people did know and were being deliberately misrepresentative.
Again, it's purely speculative. I didn't say that I knew of a conspiracy or there was evidence. I said there was evidence that there have been conspiracies in the past. There have been deliberate attempts in the past to mislead and deceive people into, accepting massive amounts of immigrants for metapolitical ends. And I cited the Houghton Plan and the Kalergi Plan.
Metapolitical?
Yeah, so actually, I did look those up. So the Houghton Plan wasn't done by a politician. It was just an anthropologist that wrote an article in editorial for The Houghton Plan was never anything that was done or advocated for by any politician whatsoever. This would be the equivalent of me finding an editorial on the New York Times and saying, well, look at what this plan was in the past. It was literally just some anthropologist guy who I think was Jewish, so maybe, I don't know if you don't like him because of that, but he just basically wrote an op-ed and he was like, oh, this is what should happen for, and it basically had to do with helping to take Germany out of like their crazy nationalistic Hitler era or whatever. It was more or less related to that. There was no grand Houghton conspiracy plan. And for the Kalergi Plan, I tried to find information on that too. I really couldn't find anything. I see that this Kalergi guy was somebody that was instrumental in founding, I think it was called the Pan-European Union.
Rusty Key. Interesting. I wonder what that goes to.
This guy wasn't an influential politician. I think he was like a count. I think he talked to a couple people. Like he was friends with a few politicians. I want to say like a
yeah, he's something about a rusty shovel? I mean a gold shovel?
Figures. Neither of these plans were some crazy subversive plan implemented by any politician anywhere. There's no evidence that any of these plans were ever exercised in any
really?
kind of
There's no evidence of that? There's no evidence of the fact that
Europe has transmute?
Transformed demographically
not by a Houghton planner.
Pure iron bar?
A Houghton plan or Kalergi plan. No.
But of course we have very limited evidence of conspiracies that happen. But look, I mean, this is fundamentally getting away from the point.
Well, I only bring it up because you
I can transmute.
Neither of these plans are even real.
No,
the Kalergi plan isn't even real, and the Houghton plan wasn't by a politician.
Again, the point is that this has been thought of before. The point is that
this wasn't a thought.
Wait, can you let me? Can I finish my point?
Sure.
Can I finish my point? Because you're talking over me.
My bad.
So the Kalergi and the Houghton Plan, the point is, I'm not saying they were implemented. I'm not saying they were exercising levers of government. What I am saying is that to speculate that people might have a vested interest in transforming the composition of the country and might deceive people has an intellectual antecedent in these ideas.
Rusty Key.
It's not like some fiction of
Where's a Rusty Key go to?
Thought of these political ends before and written about them and promulgated them.
Yeah, but I mean,
very since.
We can do baseless speculation all day. People speculate that the moon landing was fake. That doesn't make it.
That's the very point, though. Is it's not baseless. It's based on intellectual antecedents in Europe.
That have nothing to do with any politicians or any political plans. Would you take moon landing conspiracy hoax seriously because some people theorize that the moon landing could be fake? It just doesn't make any sense.
here. You're missing the point. The point was to say, if we were to speculate that somebody wanted to deceive the American public to transform it demographically, there have been intellectuals in the past who have thought the same thing. So it's not, again, I'm saying it has nothing to do with politicians. I never claimed that. So you keep saying it has nothing to do with politicians. I'm not arguing that. I'm arguing that these intellectuals had this idea. They said in order to achieve these political ends, to hurt Europe, to hurt the West in a strange, vindictive fashion, we want to inflict demographic transformation on them. And I'm saying if we are to speculate that people could have understood the ramifications of this policy, and it's quite clear if you read the actual text of the bill, what would result from it. I think it is fair to say there is a chance, and I'm saying it's a non-zero chance. I'm not saying it's a good chance. I'm saying there's a non-zero chance that this was deceptively forced on the public. And you know what? You bring up your poll. I will read you one of my polls. So you talk about 60 or 70 some percent say that they don't think people should be chosen based on their national identity. Here is a poll from Cornell, and this is from the Roper Center from 1965, and people are asked, which countries or places would you least like to see immigrants into the United States come from? Asia, 15%. 15% of respondents said they would least like to see people from that country. Mexico is 11%. People were polled and asked,
what the fuck was I gonna do?
To see people come from.
Oh,
28% said Canada, 28% said England or Scotland, 20% said Canada. I mean, all the top countries for most wanted were Northern European. All the top countries for least wanted
and through the sewers. Oh shit.
American and Asian. And we
can go in the sewers now?
Other data here. If you want,
Let me go check that out
before I get into these other numbers.
Yeah, but so first, because I don't want to just leave these points. So the Houghton Plan was not a plan to destroy Western Europe. I'm just not sure what you think it was. So the Houghton Plan was an article. I read it, actually. You can take it out of old newspapers by an anthropologist. And basically, he was kind of theorizing ideas based on kind of oldie, wacky, pseudo-y, sciencey things. But his idea was that he wanted to breed the extremism out of the German people.
No, the war strains.
Yeah, the war strains.
Ooh, what is this?
Ironically enough, Africa's not even mentioned. I think he was mentioning bringing in like British people and whatnot.
That can help you change professions.
Nothing to do with bringing black people.
Make an offering to
over the entire
change professions. What does that mean?
Very specifically targeted towards Germans and breeding out the war strains or whatever. And again, this wasn't supposed to be done secretly. He wrote this as like an op-ed in like a newspaper. It wasn't a secret subversive plan. There's no evidence that anybody tried to implement anything he said. It's just not what you're presenting it as.
You're fixating on a small detail. I'm not presenting it as anything other than I am. What I'm saying is people have theorized in the past that you can use immigration, whether it be from Britain or Africa or anywhere else. People have theorized that you can use race, you can use the transformation of the demographic composition to inflict harm on it. And I'm saying, again, I said there's a non-zero chance that happened. And given, again, the result of the immigration, and if you read the text of the bill, there is no way that you could not predict that you would have massive third world immigration. There's no way. And so, and again, I'm being generous in saying, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. However, there is a non-zero chance because you look at the provisions of the bill, they must have understood this was the consequence, and you have these intellectual antecedents in the Kalergi Plan, which you didn't mention, which the Kalergi Plan was to create this global race of Asiatic Afro-Europeans that are stupid and can be lorded over. And I'm saying that if those intellectual antecedents exist, if certain elements are controlling the U.S. government, if, we concede that we don't have a representative government, if we listen to some of the things Jack Kennedy was saying about the
you just get a bunch of purple shit?
Conspiracy theories, but that is one point of it. That was one point about it made in passing. Let's agree to disagree on this.
Well, we can, but I have to.
No. But by far and away, that is not the central point of my claim about the will of the people. Is not the possibility that there is a non-zero chance it was conspiratorial. My point is, they transformed the country. The people didn't want it. And here you have data. Here you have data that says that the people did not want immigrants from Mexico and Asia. They wanted immigrants from North America. So why did
but that's not true. You're misquoting your own data. You're misquoting your own data, though.
Whoa, what the fuck is that?
So quoting the data, I have it right in front of me.
You're not, unfortunately. So you're.
Wow, what the fuck?
That you read to me. You quoted that people prefer certain peoples of certain nations. That doesn't mean that they don't want those other people at all.
No, actually.
That's unusual.
which places would you least like to see?
Okay.
And it's Asia, Middle East, Mexico, Latin America.
Why didn't these people, if they felt so strongly about not wanting to see these types of
void egg.
this plan from passing?
Again, you are arguing that people should have done more. I'm arguing that our government's job is to represent us.
Yeah,
interesting. A mysterious fruit that empowers those who eat it.
I can point to concrete polling data. I can point to
20,000.
You're pointing to a poll that says that some people prefer people from some countries over other countries.
No. I'm saying people did not prefer
We
the
get
people.
statue. There's something on so long.
I concede that. That's fine. That they didn't prefer those people. But I have all of this evidence on my end that says that there.
Furniture collection.
You have two very ambiguous polls
Butterfly.
that say people don't care about national origin, and I have a poll that says actually that is completely
Scepter in the sky and return home at will. Oh shit.
And gets to the heart of the matter, which is these certain people we do not want. Your poll says we don't care.
Okay, I guess there's really nothing I can do in here.
What should be most important in determining whether or not a person comes to the United States? Your poll says that if we consider national origin, who do you want? These are two fundamentally different questions. Do you understand this or no?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
yeah,
so
sure. And
your
who
poll
the
is not
people who
relevant to
came
this question. The question is, if you were to ask people, let me put it this way, okay? Let's say that I were to ask, what is your most preferred trait in a woman? And you list 5 things. And the 4th thing that you list is, I wish that she had blonde hair. And then I were to do a separate poll of people, and I were to go, look, 95% of people prefer brunettes over blonde people. You couldn't come back and say, well, having a brunette is the most important thing if in the initial list, hair color was 4th on the list. Does that make sense? Your poll doesn't...
You're obfuscating it.
I'm not. My polls are very clear. The question we're asking right now isn't... The question isn't which countries did people prefer people to come from. The question is, did we want to prevent people from coming from certain countries? And you cannot sufficiently demonstrate that we wanted to restrict immigration based on national origin, which is the exact question both of my polls
It's right
address.
here. It says those are the people that they don't want in the country. I don't understand how you can justify the fact that we bring in millions of people from countries that Americans said they don't want people from those countries here, and how a representative government, you claim to be like this progressive, you claim to be this person, you're against the Iraq war because we were lied into it, we were lied about what that would be like, and that was wrong. Well, in the 1965 Immigration Act, we were lied about what that would entail. People said they supported it, and they expected they'd be getting Canadians and Scandinavians and Germans, and they got Mexicans and Asians, and they didn't want those people. And it doesn't, again, you have this effect in polls where people might ask you, does national origin matter? And maybe it's a nice thing you can say, oh, I don't care so much. But then you see very clearly that people do care about these things when they say they don't want these groups of people.
I guess I just don't know how to address this. Your poll just doesn't talk about what you wanted to talk about. Did you understand my analogy with the girl with the preference thing? Did that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, here. Maybe this will clear things up. Here's another element from my poll. I think this will seal the deal here. So this is another one from Roper from Cornell. It says, here is a list of different groups of people. This is what the people that were polled were asked. Do you think we should let a certain number of each of these groups come to the United States to live after the war? And this was in 1944. Or do you think we should stop some of the groups from coming at all?
Why do we care about a poll
people
in 1944?
Said 41% of people said stop Mexicans.
Wait, why do we care about a poll in 1944? This isn't relevant to anything we're talking about right now.
Of course, sure it is. You
no,
don't
it's
think
absolutely not.
No. Of course it is. Of course it is.
No, it's not. The country in 1965.
So you have your 2 polls. I have all this data, and now you're saying, polling doesn't matter because it was before the Immigration Act?
Because we were in a totally different era. You don't think the 60s were different than the 40s? Do you honestly believe?
I didn't say they were not different.
Then why do you think the American...
It's the same. And we see the same opinions, by the way. We see the same opinions. It was in 1944 they said, stop Mexicans from coming in. In 1965 they said, we don't want Mexicans coming in. I don't understand why, because you have one poll that was repeated another time. So you have one poll that says one thing. I have data from 1944 that says we want to stop Mexicans from coming in the country. I have a poll from 1965 saying we don't want Mexicans. We want Northern Europeans coming into the country. Our representative Congress voted against those interests that had endured for 20 years. So, that, of course, that's relevant. You'd like to say, it's not directly related to this sliver of it, and therefore it's irrelevant, but we have to paint a picture of what the consensus looks like. A consensus that existed from 1944 to 1965. We don't want these people here.
We have to talk. We can't move past the polling question. So your poll is presupposing the question that we mean to ask, right? The question we're asking is, should nationality be an important determining factor on whether or not people move here? For that question, I have overwhelming support from Congress that voted on both halves, and I have polling data that shows that. You have a poll that is presupposing the question that we're basing our immigration policy on nationality, and then asking people to pick groups from that point. How do you think that this polling data is supporting your argument?
Because you have one poll, which I don't even know. I doubt the veracity of that poll. Because again, you're asking.
It was
people,
done by Harris and Gallup. You don't trust these guys?
No, I actually don't. But again, you're asking people. You're asking people if they care about national origin. And again, you see this effect with polling in general. You have an effect of shyness in polling, and I don't think a single person would honestly say, and I think you're being intellectually dishonest here, that people in 1965 didn't care about who was coming into their country. I don't believe you're being intellectually honest there.
I mean, then why did they vote the way they did? Why was the Immigration Act
people
passed?
Voted for that? People, or did the Congress vote for that? I think the Congress voting for cheap labor to come in the country is a lot different than people voting for a politician running on a platform of letting cheap labor into the country. Because the Congress is beholden to interests that wants cheap labor in the country, both the Republicans and the Democrats. So, you keep bringing up, I have a consensus from Congress. A consensus from Congress doesn't mean anything. 99 senators votes for $3.8 billion a year in aid to Israel. Do you think there's a 99% consensus in America, or do you think AIPAC controls the politicians?
Okay,
In the same
way off.
No. But it's an analogy to demonstrate the fact that politicians are not a gauge of the national consensus. Politicians demonstrate where the lobbying is, demonstrate where the money is.
If you want to admit right now that you don't trust any hard polling data, then we can move on from this, and then you have to agree that everything that you're speaking is conspiracy. Well, you just said you don't trust the polls.
I don't like. No. I'm citing polls. I say I don't trust.
Did you not just say that you don't trust my polls from Gallup and Harris?
Again, it's not the source, it's the question. And I don't think the question,
instead of looking up polls,
it's intellectually dishonest to say that you trust the result of that poll when it so clearly is against the historical record. I mean, you had people who cared if blacks and whites were in the same school. You think they didn't care about who was entering the country if they were from Africa or Mexico or Asia? And they say they obviously prefer some groups more than others? You believe this?
Why is it that you didn't look up a poll that would actually support your question? Why did you have to find a poll? You didn't. You found a poll that presupposed the answer. Why didn't you find? Why don't you? How about this for next time? Why don't you find polling data that shows that Americans really cared about origin of nationality? Or nationality of origin. If you can find that information, then we can talk about this. But right now, all you're giving me is a poll that presupposes...
Monster reward.
Again, this would be like me asking a group of 100 people, if you had to choose a woman with a type of hair, would you choose blonde or brunette? And then taking whatever answer that is and saying, well, this is the most important thing. It's totally non sequitur. It's totally bogus data usage.
Need a new sword?
If we could choose which nation people come from, who
would
you prefer?
Of this ring is made from enchanted crab shell. 5 defense. Interesting.
The most important determining fact of who comes into the country.
Almost on slimes. Spirits.
Again, you are using technicalities.
No. Can we talk specifically about this? Because you don't
understand
why you're making a non sequitur.
Sure. I am going to explain to you exactly why you are wrong and why you are being intellectually dishonest.
Okay.
You look at the period of time. You look at the 1960s. We have an entire decade to analyze here of sociological behavior, where we have, again, and I cited the record of the 1960s, where you had opposition to ending segregation. You had opposition to ending segregation in schools, in buses, at lunch countertops, in voting, and on and on and on. And you're trying to tell me this is the big difference between the quality of information or a quantitative versus a qualitative type of
I should have teleported. Why the fuck am I running all the way back?
Harris, which, again, great sources, but you're telling me that this poll is telling us that white people in America didn't care about who was coming into the country. I'm sorry. We have to say some polls are betrayed by the historical record. And read me if you will. Maybe this will change my mind. Read me the exact wording of the question they were asked and the exact response. Do you have that?
Sure. Before I read you that, like, you realize that...
Just read me. I mean, I may change my mind if you read me the exact wording of it.
One of the proposed changes in the immigration laws is to base quotas on the skills of people to be admitted to the United States rather than on the basis of their country of origin. Would you be in favor of such a change in the immigration laws, or do you think a country quota system is right? This was from the Harris poll. 29% of the people there answered country.
And what was the other respondents?
20% were not sure. 29%.
Oh, okay. So you're misleading us all the time. You're telling us it's more than 70%, and you have 29% that are against, and 20% that are unsure. So you have 50%.
Jesus.
I mean, what are the other responses?
Why do you think that counts as country? Why do you think the 20% not sure? 36% say skills, 15% say no difference, 20% are undecided, and 29% say country.
Wow. So you got 29% that say country, 20% that say no difference, 15% that say no difference. So you have a grand total, what is that? 64% of people that are saying and again, if you're changing the status quo, you need a positive. You need, yes, change this. A majority wants to change it from this to this. And you deceptively the entire time played it off like 70% said we want to change it from this to this, but in actuality 65% said either we're not sure, there's no difference, or keep it the way it is.
Okay, so here's the polling data. I don't think you heard the numbers right. So 36% said that they would base this on skills, and 15% said no difference. So that's 51% of people that clearly don't care. Yes.
You don't get to include the 15% who say there's no difference as saying they want positive change in a different direction.
Why would you include it in yours? Do you understand you realize that the entire argument you made earlier about the time period of the 60s completely supports my argument. The 60s was a whole time of moving forward in a progressive America. This was everything that Lyndon B. Johnson's his whole presidency was
everything.
Have you heard of the Great Society? We had a ton of civil rights things. We had I think it was the advent of like public broadcasting, expansions to Medicare, Medicaid. We had things going on with education, the arts. We had tons of urban and rural development. The whole war on poverty started then. Like, how can you possibly say that? Like, well, look at the 60s. Everybody was so racist. Even the Republican lawmakers of the day admitted that they couldn't be blatantly racist anymore. This is where the Southern strategy came from. Why are you trying to cite a poll from the 40s and then say, well, look, in the 60s, everybody hated black people? Like, come on, dude.
You got caught, and now you are trying to bury me in fast-talking words. I talk time and time again on my show how that doesn't work. You misled. You told us that 29% were for keeping national origins, and you made it seem like, and we can replay the tape for anybody that's curious or anybody that's been watching, you made it seem like 70% supported change. Again, if you want and let me ask you something. If a politician is putting a bill to the floor that will dramatically, irreversibly transform a fundamental component of the nation like demographics, do you think it is acceptable that they do so on the basis of 36% saying, yes, we want that change? Could you imagine if our politicians said, we are going to, starting tomorrow, we're going to reverse immigration and we're going to kick all the non-whites out? Would you say that it was a national consensus if 36% said, yes, let's do it, and everybody else was either unsure, maybe not, or against? I mean, that is just intellectually dishonest. Stop, just be honest.
Two things. So first of all, on the polling data that you cited, the plurality in both of those polls didn't care about where the immigrants came from. You didn't mention that. If you want to talk about dishonesty.
What are you talking about?
So in the poll that you mentioned on where you would like to see most immigrants come from, 34% of people in there said no difference, and 13%
difference.
47% of people that said they didn't really care where the immigrants came from. Yes. What do you mean no?
No, but see, that's different again because
what? Wait, it's different when you want it to support your own data.
I will explain to you very clearly. You're laughing about it. I'm prepared to explain to you why that's different.
Yeah, go ahead. I want to hear it. I want to hear the explanation.
If there are 11% of the country that says we don't want these people, if you have 26% of the people saying we don't want Russians, and you have a third of the country saying actually we want these people, that is all the difference in the world than saying 70%. I didn't create. I said the numbers. I said this percentage said they don't want these people. You said a supermajority wanted this positive
I
change.
never said that,
yes,
actually. You
want
can go
this
back in the
positive-
VOD. If somebody wants to post that in the VOD, you can say, I never said that.
no,
I said
sorry.
that
You
very
didn't
few
say
people cared about country of origin. I said that very few people cared about...
29%
Yeah.
explicitly
I
opposed
said 29%, which is true. 29% explicitly opposed it.
which explicitly endorsed it, but you... Okay,
Wait, there was no
we can
36...
go back and forth. We can... The 36% that say that they want to change it from national origin to working qualifications.
Hold on. Okay, so
right?
talking about this specifically, if you have a room full of people and you go, hey, we want to change the immigration law so that it's based on skills rather than on country of origin, and 36% go, yes, for sure, for skills, and 15% are like, oh, I don't care, you can do it either way. You consider the either way people to be part of the don't change anything crowd? How does that make sense?
Again, here's why. Because when you're transforming the nation, when you're dramatically, it's the nature of it.
But this is the thing, nobody thought it was transforming.
About zoning law? No. But but it's not about whether people knew or not. It's about whether it did or not. I mean, that's the question.
Yeah, but then we have to talk about the effect later.
People never got a vote in this. If you were talking about zoning laws,
people did vote.
I would say maybe. But you're talking about only 36% of people said, yes, let's completely change our immigration policy that was in place since the founding of the country. This immigration policy of national origins was in place since 1790. Was it reiterated in 1795, 1798, 1802, 1882, 1908, 1917, 1924? I mean, this was reaffirmed dozens of times over the course of nearly 200 years. And you're telling me that we overturn that and we change who is coming in the country and who is the country and where they come from and their blood. I mean, we change what the founders thought the country should look like based on what 36% of people say.
So you're telling me that this doesn't make any...
Wait, I'm not saying I get to claim the 15%. I'm not saying I get to claim the people that don't care or say would make no difference, but I'm saying you can't claim them. And if you want positive change, you need more than a majority.
I'm not trying to claim them. The burden is on you. You're making the argument that the will of the people wasn't represented. So I'm asking you to show me a will in the other direction, and that doesn't exist. And you're trying to say that because the country believed something for a long time, that couldn't change? So you're telling me that women's suffrage wasn't real, that the Civil Rights Act shouldn't have passed, that we should still have slaves because people believed it for hundreds of years? That argument is another non sequitur. It's totally fallacious, totally bogus.
That is a good analogy. Definitely parallel. No. What I'm saying
absolutely is. You're saying that because people believe something for hundreds of years, it's impossible that their ideas could have changed on it? That doesn't make any sense.
Correct. That's not the logic. I'm saying you have a system in place, an institution in place. You have precedent in place for 200 years. In order to overturn precedent in a democratic society or in a republic where you have people who are sovereign, you are required. And this, you could go back to Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who defines what the will of the people means. You need at least a majority to say we are going to overturn precedent. I'm not saying people can't change their minds. People change their minds all the time. People change course all the time. I think that's part of the problem, that in the wake of that act, as a result of that act, we have changed course. And I can see that in the past 10 years, we have changed our minds and changed course in the public consciousness. But what precipitated that was a congressional fiat that was not supported by a supermajority, not by a majority, by 36% in the positive direction. If you want change, if you want to overturn law, and if that is representative of the people, you need 50% to say they're on board. Like gay marriage,
50% with what? In what government? What government do you think we live under? You're making baseless claims. You're saying that you need 50%. We don't vote by referendum in the United States.
Are you pretending like I haven't been talking about the will of the people? Are you seriously pretending like I haven't been talking about the will of the people?
The problem is that,
just mention what Jean-Jacques Rousseau said about
I don't care about what Jean-Jacques Rousseau said. I care about our form of government.
You're not trying to understand my argument.
No, I understand your argument, but I mean, the rest of this data, it all supports me. Now, I want to hand you a list of bills. These were by the same people, okay, or by a similar group that was polled. Now, I want to hand you a list of bills passed by this Congress. For each, tell me if you approve or disapprove of that bill from what you know or have heard of it. ... So this is one of the questions asked. Immigration based on individual skill rather than country quota. 70% of people approved. Do I get to claim those people, or do you have a way to weasel those out of my approval rating as well?
Wait. Is this part of the same poll? Send me this poll. Let me see.
I sent it to you on Skype. This was asked several months later in December of 1965 by Harris.
Interesting how this comes up after it comes out that you've been completely intellectually dishonest, misrepresenting.
I sent all of you this like 5 minutes ago on Skype, dude. 7:30. I sent this to you 10 minutes ago.
Well, let's see. How important do you think each of the following factors should be in determining whether or not a person from another country should be admitted to live in the United States? Occupational skills. Oh, wait a second. It says 32% for the country in which a person was born, occupational skills 71%, 21% say it's not important. Again, though, we're talking about overturning. We're talking about overturning 200 years of precedent. This
Who
is
cares?
not
We did it with women's suffrage.
Fuck.
We did it with the Civil Rights Act. Why does the precedent matter to you? The country changes. It's how we've moved as a country.
And again, here it says, and here's this is a beauty. Again, with the dishonesty. For each, tell me if you approve or disapprove based on what you know or have heard of it. What you have heard of it. That sets off some alarm bells because the people that sponsored the bill and Ted Kennedy, who pushed the bill, said explicitly and in all kinds of media coverage that it would not change the demographic composition. He said, number one, it wouldn't change us from being a white nation. And number two, you wouldn't see floods of immigrants. Both of those things were incorrect. So when people are asked, based on what you've heard, would you support this legislation? And 70% say they approve. Well, that just gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it?
It does. It gets to the will of the people. Maybe they were misinformed, but it was the will of the people, my dude. 70% approved of it. That's the will of the people. I'm sorry.
So now you're going a little loopy here.
I'm not. You can make, if you want, you can make the argument that the people were uninformed. It would be easier to defend than the conspiracy theory you're trying to defend now, but you can't tell me with a straight face that there was a conspiracy in Congress that only some politicians knew about, where they intentionally misled other politicians and the entire American public because I read a crazy article by an anthropologist 10 years earlier. Like, your argument is conspiracy. I have very solid data that supports my argument. I have bipartisan support in Congress that supports the bill, and I even had racist senators like Dixiecrats who not only supported the bill but enjoyed following electoral wins in their districts for the following 2 or 3 electoral seasons. So very clearly, the will of the American people was represented. I think I've sufficiently demonstrated that. All you have to counter that is, well, this is what I feel like at the time, and I have a data that shows that some people like some immigrants more than others, but not a question.
Are you ready?
Yeah, go ahead. I should go for it.
Here.
Yeah, go for
it. Well, let's take the data piece by piece because we have 2 numbers here. Okay. So it says one of the proposed changes in the immigration law. So this is when they ask about the actual change that's occurring. And here, let's see, and please allow me to finish here. Listen to me and respond honestly, because I cannot see how anybody watching this
fucking cherry bombs
continues to believe you who is distorting my arguments. I'm going to lay it out right here.
Okay.
One of the proposed changes in the immigration laws is to base quotas on the skills of people to be admitted to the United States rather than on the basis of their country of origin. Would you be in favor of such a change in the immigration laws, or do you think a country quota system is right? Now, this provision, if enacted, would overturn the precedent set by the Immigration Act of 1790, 1795, 1798, the Immigration Law of 1802.
I don't know why we need to name every single immigration law. We can go for it.
Can I finish here?
Go ahead.
Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the negotiated end to Japanese immigration.
Can we skip to the end?
There's only 3. Hey, I let you finish. The negotiated end to Japanese immigration in 1908, the 1917 law, which made all immigration from Asia illegal, and immigration limits in 1921 and 24 based on national origin. So you're overturning that provision, would overturn that precedent, which is 200 years long and affirmed on 25 years interval for that 200 years. And the people that support that, here, let me pull it up here. 36% say they support that change. 29% say they want to keep the old system. 50% say no difference. 20% say not sure. Now, if you are going to overturn 200 years of precedent, and this is the first number, and I will get to the second number. If you are going to overturn 200 years of precedent that has been reaffirmed by Congresses from 1790 to 1924, and you only have 36% saying they support that. Again, I'm not saying that the no difference and not sure people are in my camp, but I'm saying if these people support that change, if we're going to make that change, you need a majority to support that change for it to be representative of the will of the people. You can have a bipartisan support in the Congress that support this, and that represents the will of the Congress. But if you're polling people and only 36% of people say they want to change this, in what country and in what universe do we make drastic changes to policy based on what 36% of people believe. If 36% of people say, like, oh, I don't know, we want to invade China tomorrow, people would say that's ridiculous. You need 51%. I understand it's a poll. But we're talking about, does it represent the will of the people? Was it just? That was the question.
Oh.
Just, it passed by a majority.
So can we talk about that first point before we go into 50 million other data sets for the second point?
I'm not finished with the first point. I'll be finished in a moment. Okay. But was it just? It did not represent the will of the people that 36% were in support of it. This differs from the second number in that it tells the people.
No, I want to talk about the first number. Can we talk about the first number before we?
No, but I'm using it in comparison to the second. We'll get to the second number. You're very eager. We have time here.
I know I'm eager because you talk past the points, and then what happens is I have to address the last thing you said, and then the 50 other things you said that were totally wrong. I don't have a chance to address because then we get super hung up on the one thing. So on the first,
in comparison
the
to the second, I still never finished. On comparison to the second, the last point. In comparison to the second number. This number specifically talks about the provisions. Do you support the provisions in the bill? And only 36% say they support changing the precedent. That's not representative of the will of the people. That is unjust. That is not democratic. That is not Republican.
It is democratic, dude. If we would have put this up to a vote, 36% felt strongly yes, 29% felt strongly no. If it would have been on a referendum like you keep saying, they would have won. Would you be arguing against it then?
Again, it's not about it wasn't put to a referendum. We don't know.
Stop. You kept saying that if we put it up to a vote, was the will of the people represented? If we were to put this up to a vote, people that don't think there's a difference or they're not sure, they probably wouldn't vote anyway. So if we would have put it up to a popular vote, 36. Okay. Well,
that was a referendum on it. I said if a major candidate ran on a platform of this that would have served as a referendum.
I want to ask you a very specific question, okay? If we were to put this up to a popular vote like you would have wanted, okay, what do you think would have passed?
If we put 65 Immigration Act up to a vote?
Yeah, based on the numbers that you see here.
Based on the numbers that I see here, I would say that people would vote against it. I would say that.
So you're claiming the people that have no strong preference one way or another, and the people that aren't sure. Somehow you claim those, even though
they would vote in favor of precedent. Yes, people that are not sure,
and you have no data, no basis to support that whatsoever. That
is an a priori truth about humans that we and institutions. Additionally, that precedent prevails unless you get a majority that wants change. I mean, this is just basic stuff. And again, people.
You keep saying that, but then you cite well, look at all these. We're changing precedent. We did it with women's suffrage. We did it with the Civil Rights Act. Precedent has changed in the United States.
That's a good example. Women's suffrage was a change of precedent. That was a constitutional amendment. Do you know what kind of process has to be undertaken to get a constitutional amendment? You have to have the will of the people. You have to either get 2/3 of the state. You have to get 2/3 of the state to ratify. You need 2/3 of the Senate to vote for it. I mean, depending on how you want to go about it. But you need massive majorities to get that passed, and at the state level and at the federal level, which would be impossible if the people didn't want it. And that's why I say that women's suffrage was not an injustice.
Man, I shouldn't put a diamond in there. It's too fucking
the will of the people is executed. That's the constitutional system. That is the spirit of our system of government.
It's not, though. That's not how our government works. We don't vote by referendum. I don't know why you keep saying this.
No. You keep distorting. I'm saying the system of government is based on the sovereignty of the people. The people change things. And it is based on majorities. It is based on people choosing what is best for their country. And when you have people that misled these people,
you have no proof of that. Can you prove that? Wait, because you just said that again. Can you prove that people misled people?
They did mislead them, whether intentionally or unintentionally.
Oh, okay.
Misleading does not assume intentionality.
It usually misleading somebody implies intent. You know that. You're being dishonest right now, but go carry on.
No.
Well, yes,
the
because
fuck?
that's the reason why you cited. That's why you cited. No. That's why you cited the Kalergi plan and the Houghton plan, both things that I completely debunked. You cited them as evidence that politicians
that it was deceitful. But was it misleading? Regardless of intentionality, it was. And you're trying to tell me that because the people were lied to and they voted
for it,
you
can't prove that they were lied to. You can't prove that they were lied to. You have no proof of that.
Again, okay, I misspoke. Because the people were misled.
And the politicians and everyone in Congress.
70% of people said based on faulty information that they heard, they supported it. You're saying like, oh, that means they supported it. No, because if you look at the actual numbers, when they made their voices heard on the provisions of the bill, only 36% of people said they supported it. So, and look,
and only 29% wanted to maintain the status quo. So
no. But you can't say, well, there's no majority, therefore plurality wins. Plurality is not representative of the will of the people.
Well, no, representative of the will of the people is the represented politicians that we elect in to vote for us. That's how representative actually works. I don't know what system you're referring to, but...
Disagree. I think it was...
you can disagree, but then you have a fundamental disagree with the government of the United States. I mean,
I think it was... You have incidental cases with our system of government where the will of the people is not represented, is misrepresented. That is not systemic. It's becoming systemic.
Gotcha.
But in this case, it was incidental.
So I'm curious. Do you agree then that every single thing pretty much that Trump has done is against the will of the people? Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Crystals.
Because pretty much everything he's done is pulled on. Now it's different.
No, it is. You want to know why it's different?
Sure. Why is it different now?
Because in 1965, the vast majority of people in the country,
Ruby Topaz Emerald,
originated from the founding stock of the country in 1790.
Oh, I think I have one of
were
these.
descended from either slaves or settlers that were in this country in 1790. That is a little something called the social contract. Those people.
The social contract has nothing to do with being racist. I don't know why.
They were a charter society, and when they formed what our government was, and they laid out what the Constitution and what this government would look like, they had a social contract with their ancestors, with posterity. So the people in
we'll get into that. I think that might actually be my next thing that we'll hop into.
Had a choice of what they wanted to do with their civilization. In 2017, I don't think when you have people that washed up on the shore 20 years ago have a same claim to the destiny of the country as people 50 years ago, and that's part of the problem with mass immigration. That gets to the heart of the argument. So you try and compare and contrast, but it's a fundamentally different situation.
Sure.
That's
for the will of the people argument, all of the polling data will always be warped to support your view. You'll bring up polls from 1944, and then the will of the people only matters in regards to this one specific provision. It doesn't matter today. So I guess we move on from this point. I think you're being very dishonest here with your representation of most of this.
But, we'll let the people judge. We'll see.
Well, the people already did. The Congress voted for it, and nobody had any repercussions for it. I'm sorry, dude. The people already decided.
People who are watching this can determine whether or not this polling data supports the 1965 Immigration Act.
And you can think that, and I guess if you have that thought in your head right now, if you're watching, oh yeah,
You say something like get a golden shovel or something.
No political repercussions to any of this at the time. No politician that voted on this ever had big blowback. Nobody in Congress suffered big blowback.
No blowback.
What?
There's no blow. I think the 2016 election was the blowback. It was 50 years late.
The 50 years late blowback. Okay, so all right, I'm okay.
We didn't see it actualized until 2017. We didn't see it manifested until 2017. But you saw referendums throughout the 1980s of people who rejected bilingual schools, who rejected.
You had Nixon that approved amnesty.
So you had resistance to this throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and
sure.
So you're saying,
but this is a separate argument. Why are you talking about the 70s, 80s, 90s? We were talking about if the will of the people is represented in the 60s. You keep trying to pivot to different points.
But you said
what do I mean?
Blowback from something that didn't
Ruby Topaz Emerald.
As this has manifested, the blowback has only increased in intensity.
You
went from it wasn't even represented in the 70s. Right? The demographic transformation in terms of the rate at which people were coming here was not even as high as it would become in the 80s and 90s. You started to see opposition to this, I think, in the greatest incidents with Pat Buchanan in the early 1990s. You see it culminate with Donald Trump in 2016. So you said there's no blowback. That's not true.
It happened 30 years later. So the will of the people at the time was represented, and now
we see the results of it until 30 years later.
Okay, so I'm curious. Let's say that I just want to ask a hypothetical. I'm curious what your answer will be. Let's say that we vote to go to war with, let's say North Korea. Okay, let's say that we vote right now to go to war with North Korea. 95% of people say yes, let's do it, and that is the will. Let's say we have divine polling data. 95% of American citizens are ready. Record numbers. Sign up for the draft. And we do it. Let's say that we send our boats, we send our planes, we send our everybody to North Korea.
All right,
and then North Korea nukes the country. And let's say that, in New York City, LA, Chicago, all of our big cities, San Francisco, everything gets hit. Everything is fucked. And let's say at this point, 85% of people, or like 99% of people, are like, "Wow, the war was a big mistake." With nukes.
They shouldn't have told them. They shouldn't have told them. I mean, that's kind of the point.
So you would argue then that even if all the best data said that we know that North Korea has no weapons, we're going to go there, we're going to blow them up.
You're creating an analogy when we have data for what happened, and I'm
we
using
don't.
your data.
No, we don't have any data,
that
dude.
Your data is correct. Yeah, we do.
You're trying. No, you're trying to say that.
Come on, Emily.
Sound like that people were intentionally.
I need you to come out of your fucking.
I'm not dropping that. I said.
So now you do believe they were intentionally misled? Because earlier you said you dropped that.
You're being such a sophist. I brought you on because I thought you might be intellectually honest. It's not happening. I said, and I've repeated this throughout. And this has been consistent throughout. I said, I speculate that there is a non-zero chance that people were deceived.
Why?
There is
why do
100%. There is way because this is. I mean, that is
why do we?
true.
Okay, I speculate a non-zero chance that aliens control the government.
There is a 100% reality that people were misled.
Oh, there she is.
Non-zero chance
Get over here.
happen. And again, you're fixating on that because it's the smallest percentage here. But there is a 100% reality that people were misled, intentionally or not. They were told they would not transform. It would not increase the volume of immigration to a alarming.
That's not what I.
That it did. And you look at your own polling data.
Supports that if we put it up to a vote, I would probably win. Yeah, sure.
No. It says if. No. Again, read what your own poll says.
Yeah, I read it. I say it right here. 70% of Americans approve it at the time.
70% based on what they've heard about the bill, which was not true about the bill. When
it was true at the time. It was true to our best information.
Hey, what the fuck?
Here's where the distinction came, which you kept trying to talk over me, but 70% approve of what they hear of the bill. When people were asked about the provisions inside the bill and not what they heard, which was misleading, only 36% say they supported the change. And everybody else was either unsure, didn't know, or they supported the precedent.
I just think it's really interesting that you group all these other people in your camp when I could just as easily group them in mine.
Again, how many times do I have to say I'm not putting them in my camp? But if you want change, you need a majority in your camp. I'm not putting.
Friendship 101.
You keep saying that you need a majority. You don't need a majority. You just need Congress to vote on it, which we had a majority on the Republican and Democrat side.
So here's a good example. If you're at a pizza party, okay, and you got 10 friends over, and let's say we're deciding, well, do we want to order pizza or do we want to order wings? And 30% say,
nice.
You know, I want pizza. But we always get wings. We get wings every week. Every week we get wings. Every week we talk about how much we love wings. It's the tradition. Wings, we know we like. We know it works for us. We fucking love our wings, okay? We get them. We've done it for 200 weeks. We've had wings. And today, we say, you know what? Let's put it up to a vote. Wings or pizza? And 20% say wings. And 15% say, I don't think there's any difference. 29% say, 29% say we want wings. 15% say there's no difference one way or the other. And 20% say we're not sure. And 36% say we want pizza. Now, and this is a silly analogy, but we simplify it so we can get to the logic of it. In what universe does that 36% plurality able to overturn 200 weeks of tradition, overturn things that we know work, things that we know. And
this is like a really bad analogy to give.
Liberalism.
In this analogy, like I would.
Conservatism says when we have things that work, we keep things that work. No, and if we want change, people need to agree on it. There needs to be a majority or a consensus.
So in this,
you have politicians in Congress.
In this example, I would win. I don't know if you realize that. If you have 4 friends and they want pizza and 3 friends want wings and everyone else is undecided, then you go with the 4. This is how it works in literally every single social situation. Do you not realize that? Of course it is. It absolutely is.
And especially not.
Wait, if you had 100, if you had 20 friends that were trying to decide what restaurant to go to, 5 of them very strongly want to go to some restaurant, and 3 are like, I really want to go to the other one. Then most people would end up siding with the 5 because that's what they feel. Like that example literally supports my point.
Again, if you know what works, if you know that this works, and you're not sure about the other thing, you go with what works. That is an ideological difference. I think that's why you're not getting it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, the entire political climate of the entire political climate of Johnson's administration was being more progressive and changing things. That's where the whole war on poverty.
Diamond.
That's where the whole Great Society came. That whole.
Put in a diamond and I get out 1 diamond.
So then 36% becomes a majority.
What's the fucking point?
Man, I mean, he's Magic Johnson, truly. But again, it's about that's where we differ.
Guess I'll try the Jade thing.
Reasonable, wise person would say, if something is working, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And if people want to fix
Can't put
it,
Jade in
they
there?
should at least have a majority. They should have a majority to. And again, we keep going around and around in circles, so maybe you want to move on.
Yeah, we can move on to the
another-
next point. That's fine. I mean, I think the government functioned as it is supposed to. I'm somewhat of a constitutionalist. I mean, the Constitution delegates this to Congress. Congress voted the way they wanted to. There was bipartisan support for it. There was no political backlash, at least until even you admit 30 or 40 or 50 years later. So, yeah, I think the will.
Fire courts.
That's a nice little. I love that like sarcastic little. You know, because
yeah, you can give your final words on it as well if you want.
Here's the honest difference. You know,
oh, maybe I did.
This kind of passive aggressive sarcastic thing. Here's the honest difference between our two positions. I believe that in 1965, when you overturn precedent, and we keep saying the same words, but it's so important. You have precedent. You have things that work. You have institutions that work and that matter.
Precedents.
And that have been reaffirmed a million times over by your ancestors. And if that is to change, you need a strong majority in favor of it. And I don't think Congress was representative of a majority. I don't think that majority existed. This data shows that it did not, because the people that were asked about the provisions in the bill, the people that were asked about the change to the precedent, only 36%.
You've got mail. If you're giving these people a hand around town, everyone you see is really thankful. I'm awarding you this month's Best Neighbor Award with a small cash prize. Keep it up. Sweet.
Stuff like this, and you think that we should ignore the entire principle of our government and leave it up to referendum?
Thanks again for the wonderful gemstones. These will be perfect for realignment work. And to thank you for the special gift. I hope you can create some wonderful items with it. Oh, what the fuck is this? Oh, she gave me a sewing machine.
A referendum vote, I said, in a referendum election. I think if you're going to do something like that, if it's something that significant, it should be a major piece of a party's platform. It should be like, do you want to go down this road or do you want to go down that road? I mean, that was at the heart of the issue. I mean, in this argument, this isolated.
Tomorrow we're getting together for the flower dance. If you can find a partner you might want to participate in, you dance yourself. There's a little clearing beyond the forest west of here. We hold the dance right.
Are people represented? Did they get what they wanted? Did they choose to favor their nation? I say this was a great injustice because people did not support this change, and it changed their lives, it changed their schools, it changed their destiny, it changed.
Why did he win re-election then?
Because the whole point of this is that it's a long-term change. You didn't see if you look at immigration, it didn't start to comprise mostly Hispanics and Asians until well into the 80s and 90s. It didn't increase in size and scope until well into the 80s and 90s. So you're asking, like, this should have been reflected in the. I mean, do you understand that we're talking about a gradual process that's happened over 50 years? That's why.
I guess, like, my problem is just that, like, you're trying to make this claim that Americans at the time didn't believe a thing, but every single thing possible points to the contrary. But now, because of how some things you're saying that if we could go back in time and give them, I guess, like, future information, they might have changed. It just seems like a really ridiculous argument to make.
It's a moral argument. It's a moral argument of was you keep trying, and this is I guess your if we could get Spenglerian for a second, I suppose this is your Kantian sensibility as opposed to my Faustian sensibility. You are saying that this should have had direct and government and elections, and you're trying to bring it down to this practical place where it never was. I'm saying, morally speaking, it was a great injustice that the U.S. Congress, which is duly obligated to represent the will of the people, represent what the people want for their country, there was a gap between what the people wanted and what the Congress passed in law. And it's a tragedy that serious consequences have been inflicted on us as a result of something our representatives passed that we were in the dark about, that we were misled about. We maybe, non-zero chance we were deceived. I'll concede there's no evidence we were deceived, but we were most certainly misled about what the result would be. And I think that's a great failing. And I think, maybe not. I'm not even going to say that because you would contest that, but it is a great failing of our republic and our democracy that
I don't know what I want to put in here.
Took a dramatic left turn, and people did not choose that. Some people wanted that, but the vast majority either said stay the course, or we're not sure, or
we don't care. Do what you want.
So, and you keep trying to say, like, again, I think people can, if they're if they're trying to understand my argument, I think if you were being intellectually honest, if you've read, and this is not to be big brain nibba, but if you've read, I'm coming at this from the sense of Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract. I'm coming at this from
Jean-Jacques
Reflections on the
Rousseau.
Revolution in France and Edmund Burke. I mean, this is political philosophy stuff.
And
there was precedent.
Okay, sure. You just have, I mean, yeah, okay, we can move on to the next point. You really have no data to support your point. You just kind of have your roundabout, like, I mean, I guess I just don't really know what to say. Or the data that I present, some polls you don't trust, but if you can twist it around, you kind of trust it. And then there was no political backlash. Everybody supported it in terms of congressmen.
We've beat it. I'll let you get the last one.
Okay.
We've beat the. We can move on.
Gotcha. Okay. The second thing we brought up was the original intent argument from the Constitution.
Yep.
In this argument, tell me if you feel like this is a fair phrasing. If you feel like anything is unfair, feel free to pull it back. And I will rephrase it. Your argument was that the Founding Fathers wrote, "To ourselves and our posterity," in the preamble of the Constitution. We can use context clues from other writings of the Founding Fathers, such as the Federalist Papers, to figure out what they meant by posterity, that one word that you love so much. The Federalist Papers, number 2, John Jay writes, "A people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government. It is clear from these statements that the Constitution was clearly designed to protect the European Christian people." Do you agree that's a fair summary of your original intent argument?
Did you say that? Yeah.
Okay, so I did some, I guess, digging around of writing that the original Founding Fathers did, and I guess not as surprisingly, I just couldn't find anything that ever supported any of this at all. I have your quote, I guess, from John Jay that he wrote in the Federalist Papers number 2. I'm just kind of curious as a non sequitur, and I mentioned this in our big 1-on-5 debate that we had. Do you feel like John Jay, who also said that he wanted to keep Catholics out of New York, do you feel like that should be respected as well, or do you ignore that part of his original intention?
It's not about ignoring things. It's a matter of degrees. And here, as a good counterpoint, I also did a little research from one of my favorite books.
Well, wait, can you answer this real quick before we move on to 50 million? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I love the sass here. Great book, Who Are We by Sam Huntington. I recommend everybody read that on the subject. But here's a little table that he brought up, and I think this will answer this because I knew you were going to bring this up, and I constructed this officially for you. My infamous whiteboard here, and you're not on camera on Skype, so you're not going to be able to see this, but I'll do my best to explain it. So this is from Who Are We by Sam Huntington, and he made a little chart, and he said that American identity over the course of America's existence was comprised of 4 separate categories. You have an ethnic American identity, a racial American identity, a cultural, and a political identity. From 1607, it says
fucking
1620 here, it should read 1607, to 1775, you had an ethnic, a racial, and a cultural identity, but not a political. From 1775 to 1940, you had an ethnic, a racial, cultural, and a political identity. So you had all 4 categories that Americans were united on from 75 to 1940. From 1940 to 1965, the ethnic component went away. And we know this because you had mass immigration in the 20th century from South and Eastern Europe, Catholics, like you said, Jews, you had Asians, I mean, all kinds of people, and that's where ethnicity went away. From 1965 until 1990, the racial component went away. So you were left from 65 to 90 with just the cultural and political identity. From 90 to 2017, you just have the political identity. So what I mean to say with John Jay's quote there is we need to preserve as much as we can those 4 components of identity. Ethnic is gone, and I concede that he didn't want Catholics.
Monster Compendium.
That's not even in reference to all the other people who spoke on this subject. But John Jay
well, because you keep making little quotes like that. Like in an 1819 letter, John Quincy Adams wrote as Secretary of State, "The government of the United States has never adopted any measure to encourage or invite emigrants from any part of Europe. They must cast off their European skin, never to resume it. They must look forward to their posterity rather than backward to their ancestors." In 1788, George Washington wrote to a Dutch politician, Francis van der Kamp, "I had always hoped that this land might become a safe and agreeable asylum to the virtuous and persecuted part of mankind, to whatever nation they might belong." I mean, there are tons of quotes of people that were instrumental in drafting the original Constitution.
Yeah.
That
can I answer all this?
Yeah, go for it.
I knew you were going to bring all this up, and that's why I have everything I need. So in regards to the John Q. Adams quote, when he says that, refresh my memory, what was it John Q. Adams? He says that, what is it again?
The government of the United States has never adopted any measure to encourage or invite immigrants from any part of Europe. They must cast off the European skin never to resume it. They must look forward to their posterity rather than backwards to their ancestors.
Yes, that does not that quote does not negate the fact that it should have been a European stock. What he's saying is they should craft an American identity, and that's the Latin expression that's on our coins. That's the Latin expression that was a part of our government from the beginning, which was e pluribus unum, out of many one. And the point of that was out of many European identities, which at the time of the first census in 1790, the country was 80%. Was 80% British. It was 60% English, 80% British, because English are partly British, and most of the remaining 20% was European, 98% Protestant. What they were saying was, out of this conglomeration of Northern and Western Europeans and Protestants would come a uniquely American identity. So that does not say, let's have immigration from Mexico and Africa. That's John Q. Adams.
Hold on. For what you just said,
sure, go ahead.
Nothing there points to we should only have immigrants from the same place over and over again. You're just describing the composition of America in the 1700s, which doesn't even agree with your definition of only white Europeans. That was literally
do you have a quote? Do you have a quote where he, instead of saying, I mean, it's remarkable to me how you completely ignore historical context. Like, you are projecting and writing into these quotes like a 1970s multicultural definition of America. If we're talking about John Q. Adams, who was president in the 19th century. We're talking about a president who was alive when slavery was an actuality. And he makes a quote that, if we take my interpretation of it, means Americanization of Protestant Anglo-Saxons. That makes sense during the time. You are reading into it an interpretation that what he actually meant was that Europeans it's not just a European country. When he says cast off your European skin and become an American, he doesn't mean e pluribus unum. He doesn't mean what his father said. He doesn't mean what any of the founders said. No. He means import millions of people from Mexico and Africa and change the ethnic and cultural. He means destroy the American identity that prevailed.
You're loading this a lot. So the burden isn't
because it's
hold on. It's not ridiculous. The burden
presupposition.
It's not a presupposition. The burden
mass immigration policy.
The burden is on you. Okay.
Sure.
I already have the law on my side because nowhere in the Constitution does it favor European immigrants anywhere. So the burden is on you to prove to me that your current concept of white, which, by the way, coincidentally now includes people like me who are half Cuban and people like you who are a quarter Mexican.
You're not white, my friend.
Yeah. So, and you who are a quarter Hispanic, right? Your idea of what white even means is something that was totally not understood at the time, and you're trying to say that people felt that way. Here's a quote by Benjamin Franklin, who was
Go ahead. Again, yeah, sure.
I'm sorry, I have to keep my talking down to 30 seconds so you can do your 5-minute spiel. Go ahead.
Wow, I love that. I love the sass here. So again, because you do these little like drive-bys and pot shots, and then I actually explain them in nuance and detail, and you get offended because it's like
nuance.
It doesn't stand when people actually dissect it.
Okay,
You're talking about a quote from John Q. Adams, where he is saying they cast off their European skin and they become Americans. Now, again, we defer to what the founding fathers said. We defer to his times. What does this mean in the context of the times he was living? Does it mean your interpretation? And you're saying burden of proof is on me. Okay, fine. Look at the context of his era. Again, you had a
Constitution.
Again, you had a country that was 98% Protestant, 80% British, and ostensibly later on in the 19th century is more Irish, and that's still Northern Europeans. Arguable whether that was totally considered white. But regardless, you look at the context of the era, and he was saying, I mean, that's an obvious referral to e pluribus unum, creating a unique identity, a uniquely American.
I guess I don't need any more combat experience.
Out of the former European nations and all the strife that went on over there, you're reading into it like he's saying, cast off your European character because this is not a country that takes after Europe. This is not a European country. This is not for white people. This is for everybody in the whole world. What interpretation do you're really like having this?
But you don't have
insane extrapolation.
No, I'm not. You extrapolated your entire argument from John Jay using the word posterity, which was written in the Federalist Papers, which was literally used to unify the people of the United States. States. This wasn't even a document. Well, hold on. The document the document that you're referring to wasn't even a commentary on immigration. It was literally just an attempt to unite the American peoples. That's all it was. And you're trying to extrapolate that one word posterity. What do you mean wrong?
It's about, because look, you have a nation which has a crisis of identity. This is a unique time in history. This is a unique country. There is this idea, and it persists today, that American identity is only about the creed of work ethic, of constitutional individual liberty, of Republican government, of et cetera, et cetera. The founding character of the country, which was English in character. And you are trying to sell us that John Jay, when he said that this nation was given to one united people of the same religion, of the same language, of the same ancestors, and like you say, oh, that's totally irrelevant. That wasn't a commentary on who should be in the country. That was like,
fuck? Why are you turning it sideways?
To unite the already ethnically, racially, religiously, linguistically homogenous people of the United States.
Stop. You're lying right now. We were not homogenous. Dude, we were not homogenous. No, we weren't. That's why the Federalist Papers were written. The whole reason.
Were we not?
And culturally, the whole reason why the. Why? Okay, I'm sorry. Tell me, why were the Federalist Papers written if we were already all homogenous and ready to be Americans?
Gain support for the Constitution.
Why would we need to gain support for unifying all of the colonies into one federal government?
Because you had, again, I will refer you to the chart from 16.
No. I don't want to chart. I want you to just answer that question.
We were not unified politically. That was.
Why weren't we unified politically? So you don't think that So you think that a homogenous people weren't unified politically? Why do you think the Federalist Papers were written?
They were not. No. But it's all the difference in the world between having an Anglo-Saxon tradition that derives from the Magna Carta, that derives from the Glorious Revolution, and deciding what kind of government they wanted, to what extent it would be a liberal government, than saying Africans are equally American. The composition of the country at this time was completely homogenous. You're trying to say that because they disagreed about what size the central government would be, which relative to all governments in the history of mankind and all governments in the world was basically like this close to each other, was an inch apart from each other. Do we want a confederation or do we want a federal system? That denotes as much heterogeneity as having a country of minorities and different ethnicities and races and religions. It's just so deceitful. You're so disingenuous. How can you sit here and peddle this nonsense? It's a joke.
I mean, it's funny because to you in the 2000s, which is actually evidence that multiculturalism has worked to some extent because you're a quarter Hispanic, are pretending that just because everybody looked white and had the same religion, that there were no differences between the people.
They were
the whole point of the Federalist Papers. The entire point of the Federalist Papers was to unite the peoples so that they would all come together and form a federal government, so that they wouldn't remain separate states because they didn't think they would be able to survive in that manner going forward. The Federalist Papers were not a commentary on immigration, and nothing, not a single word of what you say is anywhere in any parts of the Constitution. Nothing that you say is there. The only thing that you have is he used the word posterity once.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I only have the 1790 Act, the 1795 Act, the 1798 Act, the 1802 Law, the 1882
Let me know when you're done reading all of these off, because none of these are part of the Constitution. This is Congress exercising their powers to choose who becomes naturalized as a citizen. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say this must be restricted to Europeans. That's not we're not trying to make the argument that Congress.
And again, when you say that the Congress decides we would like to naturalize certain people, I'm not arguing that they didn't do that in the 20th century. I am arguing that the original intent of the founders, they didn't write it into the Constitution because, I mean, again, if you consider that the country was 80% one ethnicity and 20% different ethnicities of the same race, and 98% were the same religion. They didn't need to write it into the letter of the law. This is a white country. Actually, they did write it into the letter of the law, not the natural law, but the congressional law. 4 times. 4 times within, what would that be? 15 years of the Constitution passing. 4 times they affirmed that the people that come into the country were free white people of upstanding character. I mean, it's just you are ignoring.
I'm
You're
not
just
ignoring
flat out
anything.
my
I am
evidence.
acknowledging.
You flat out say, well, that evidence. Explain to me then, if the founders didn't want it to be a country that was British and European in character, that was as I say it was. I mean, what evidence do you have besides a quote by John Q. Adams that is really just e pluribus unum restated? What evidence do you have that the founders wanted this country to have Africans and Hispanics and Asians if 4 separate times within 15 years of the passage of the Constitution, they said it's only for white people to come here? Explain to me, where's your evidence to contradict that?
My evidence is that whoever we want to immigrate to the country can do so based on what Congress says, because that is what the Constitution explicitly states.
These copper bars are pretty copper bars are pretty easy to go pretty fast. I can transmute these to steel.
They changed their mind.
Okay, no, but you challenged my claim of original intent.
Yes, because your original intent is not written anywhere in the Constitution, and you have not sufficiently demonstrated that the majority of people that drafted the Constitution wanted it to be only European immigration.
I can. Oh, but I can.
Okay, go ahead.
George Washington, who says, against the insidious wiles of foreign influence, the jealousy of free people ought to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government. A foreign influence can be both domestic and in the international.
A foreign influence can be Western European as well. This doesn't support your point. What is your next quote?
I think 8 million Hispanics coming into the country in 5 years isn't foreign influence. You don't think they exercise foreign influence?
You don't think that they thought the exact same about Germans, about Swedes, about Finnish, like about everybody in the Scandinavian countries?
You did not have mass immigration in 1788.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me ask one more time. Do you have a quote that actually supports your point, or are you just going to have more ambiguous quotes?
Fine. Okay, so you don't like that one.
Well, no, because George Washington said foreign influence. You're the one that's trying to denote specific meaning when I have a very specific quote from Washington that disagrees with you.
Okay, sure. Hey, I have more quotes here.
Okay.
If you disagree with that interpretation, Alexander Hamilton. Do you agree that he is a founding father, good spokesperson for the founding intent? Okay. He says the influx of foreigners must therefore tend to produce a heterogeneous compound to change and corrupt the national spirit, to complicate and confound public opinion, to induce foreign propensities. John Jay, who, we have the quote from Federalist number 2, which you read.
Wait, hold on. Well, let's one at a time. Wait, why can't we go through the quotes one at a time?
I have many quotes.
Wait, why can't we go through them one at a time?
General says slaves are not constituent members of our society. Thomas Jefferson, whites and blacks equally free, cannot live in the same government. Jefferson, Madison, Henry Clay, John Randolph.
Okay, so let me go back to your one quote. Hold on. So I want to go back. To your. Hold on.
To push.
No, dude, stop.
To Africa. Once
so
slavery.
On your quote.
Wait.
No. Come on, dude. Are you serious? You're gonna read 50 million quotes to me and not let me respond to any of them?
Like 50 million, or were there 5? Does this sound like a founding intent to have a heterogeneous, racially and ethnically country? People that wanted to send slaves back to Africa? People that said a heterogeneous compound is corrupt and toxifies the national character? I mean, go ahead.
That initial Hamilton quote was from 1802, and the very next sentence was, the United States have already felt the evils of incorporating a large number of foreigners into their national mass. I'm sorry, did Mexicans already immigrate to the United States in 1802?
No. So he is against mass immigration. He was against the mass
But it has
immigration.
nothing to do with Mexicans or Africans. This is against all immigration.
Yes.
So this quote doesn't further your point. What was your next quote?
Sure it does.
No, it doesn't. It absolutely. You were arguing in favor of
You're sounding a little unhinged here. Alexander Hamilton saying he's against mass immigration, okay? I am against mass immigration. I am against immigration that is not of European character. If 100 million Russians came to this country, I wouldn't say that's okay. The founding intent was against both mass immigration and against immigration from non-European countries.
Okay, so your quote from Hamilton has nothing to do with immigration from non-European countries. What was your next quote?
Okay, it supports mass immigration, which is also a crucial
Which
part
also wasn't written into any part of the Constitution.
I would be fine with a small amount of immigration of any character if it were small. But
wait. Okay, hold on. Well, we can find common ground there. So you're saying that you would be opposed then. You're not saying that you would prefer immigration from Western Europe. You're saying that you're actually opposed to almost all immigration? Would you read
both? I'm saying.
Well, here I want to hear you say that. Can you give me that platform then? Can you say I'm actually against most immigration?
Putting words in my, you're attempting to put words in my mouth. It's not working so well. what I'm saying is we want to keep America the way it used to be. You do this in two ways. You keep immigration low so that the founding stock continues to be the majority. It hasn't been the majority since 1990, but we would like to get it to a point where people that have been here constitute the majority. So that's why I'm against mass immigration of all forms. Additionally, an additional condition on immigration is it should be preferable. It should put precedent to Anglo-Saxons, Northern Europeans, Western Europeans, then maybe Eastern Southern Europeans, and then non-whites if they're very skilled. So it's two qualifiers there.
Okay, so in your characterizing of immigrants that you would prefer, here's a quote by Benjamin Franklin, okay, in a 1751 essay titled Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind, the Peopling of Countries. Franklin said, "Why should the Palatine boys be suffered to swarm into our settlements and by herding together establish their language and manners to the exclusion of ours? Why should Pennsylvania, founded by the English, become a colony of aliens who will shortly be so numerous as to Germanize us instead of us Anglifying them, and will never adopt our language or customs any more than they can acquire our complexion?" That means skin color.
Yeah, again,
which leads me to add one remark that the number of which leads me to add one remark that the number of purely white people in the world is proportionally very small. These are the people that you like, even though you're a quarter Hispanic. All Africa is black or tawny. Asia is
not a Cuban like you.
Asia is chiefly tawny. America, wholly so. And in Europe, the Spaniards, Italians, French, Russians, and Swedes are generally of what we would call a swarthy complexion. These are people that you are advocating to immigrate to our country today, that it sounds like an original founding father didn't consider white.
Yes, correct.
So then why are you arguing original intent? Let's move off the original intent.
I'm saying, wait, stop. Because, again, you are conflating my position on immigration.
Damn it, he just fucking closed. Fuck.
Position on immigration. And again, if you had allowed me to explain from the get-go, if you had allowed me to explain my entire point, which is why all of this is nonsense. You keep saying, the chart, but the chart is very important. It's about what do we want to do moving forward.
No, that's not what this argument is about. This was about the original intent of the Constitution.
For one moment.
Okay.
You never let me finish here.
Sorry, you sound a little upsetty spaghetti right now, but I'll let you finish.
I'm not upset. I'm just fine.
Upsetty spaghetti.
Since
Bookseller in town today.
The racial and the cultural component of America. In order to rebuild that, we need the cultural, the racial. It's questionable to
I love it when it rains. I don't have to fucking...
That said, the original intent of the founders, if we're going to talk about the 1965 Immigration Act, if we're going to talk about mass immigration today, it is worth noting that the people that founded this country intended that we have all four. Now, there was a dramatic influx of these swarthy type people in the 20th century, and that is generally agreed upon that those people were assimilated. That is generally agreed upon that those people were assimilated. If we stopped bringing in people like that, I wouldn't be opposed to it. But I'm saying that if you're talking about how offensive or rather how derivative something is from the founders' intent for what the country was supposed to look like, Italians and Russians are just on a totally different, they're not even playing the same sport as Africans, as Asians, as Hispanics. That's the point of the matter. That's why I brought up the chart. When we're talking about our immigration policy in the present day and why the founders' intent is relevant, we're talking about how we can reconstruct these features of American identity. And like I said, it's questionable if we could ever bring back the ethnic because of
questionable
a global minority, because whites, they're being destroyed in their homelands. It's questionable if they'll be able to thrive in their own countries, let alone be able to come to ours. So the ethnic component is very particular to our times, but racially, culturally, politically, that is where the founders' intent bears weight, because these are the things that can be saved, that can be salvaged of American identity from the founders. So you seem to be conceding that the founders' intent, and once you're arguing the founders intended something far more extreme than you're saying, but at the same time, the founders were arguing in favor of mass. So, which is it, Stephen? Which is it?
That was a beautiful soliloquy, most of it completely unrelated to what we were talking about.
Holy shit.
We're discussing what the original intention of the
God damn it.
is. So what I am saying is that your idea of some white European people, it didn't really exist insofar as what would be preferred for immigration at the time. We've got a number of quotes here that we've read. You have your posterity quote, I guess. This idea that they saw all... Now, you're trying to say, well, there's a big difference between Germans and blah, blah. That's great, but you don't really have anything to support that. The few quotes that you
Wait, whoa. I don't have any evidence to support the fact that Germans are different from sub-Saharan Africans?
That they would be preferred to them? Sure, because in 1790, 81...
I do have evidence.
Okay.
I do have evidence.
So you have evidence of a founding father. Wait, no, because I know you got a million quotes, and so I'm curious if it's actually relevant. You have a quote from one of the people that drafted the Constitution that say, "I wish for the United States to be a country where only people from Europe can immigrate, and not Africans and not Asians." You have a quote that says something like that.
Yeah, I have 4 of those quotes. It's called the Immigration Acts and the Immigration Law, and it's also
okay.
Called,
So these aren't quotes for original intent for the Constitution, my dude.
What if it's the founding Congress? And I also do have quotes as well. Thomas Jefferson, who said whites and blacks equally free cannot live in the same government. Is that an endorsement of African immigration? Is that an endorsement?
I mean, this isn't anything. This has nothing. I mean, this has nothing to do with immigration. Like,
sure it does. Sure it does. If they're saying that we don't want that blacks, Randolph says blacks are not a constituent members of our society. Jefferson says they can't live together. Jefferson, Madison, Henry Clay, Lincoln, and John Randolph all wanted to force the Africans to Africa. I mean, I don't understand. If there's evidence that they don't want these people in their country, if they don't want these people on the same legal status as whites, and if they are, then they want them out. Why? How could you say that then they would support mass immigration from non-European countries? And especially if you have this Benjamin Franklin quote who says these are swarthy people. I mean, didn't want non-Anglo people.
So
I mean, that's
you've pivoted. You've pivoted again. You have no evidence that white Europeans were preferred. You don't have any evidence of that.
Okay.
You're talking about not liking black people, not liking slaves.
I have no evidence that white Europeans are preferred.
Okay, cool. I'm okay with that. If you can admit that your current definition.
You're saying this. You are saying I have no evidence that the founding fathers wanted this country to prefer white people in immigration and in the state of the country. Okay.
Correct.
So do you think?
Correct.
Do you think that the government that was presided over by George Washington, George Washington signed both the 1790 Immigration Act and the 1795 Immigration Act. He signed those, which said the only people that can attain citizenship are free white people of upstanding color. Why would he sign that if he didn't believe that?
He can believe that, but they didn't believe in it. They didn't.
In 1802, or I'm sorry, John Adams. It would be, right?
Okay, so I don't know what argument you're trying to make right now. If you want to make the argument that people make the argument that people in the late 1700s, early 1800s wanted the country to be majority white at the time, then sure, that the founding fathers wanted the country to be white at that time. That's an argument that I totally agree with. But if you want to make the argument that the founding fathers always wanted the country to remain in that way and never change, that was the argument that you made with the original intent of the Constitution. Here's another quote by Thomas Jefferson, somebody that you quoted earlier. "I'm not an advocate for frequent changes in laws and constitutions, but laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more developed, more enlightened, as new discoveries are made, new truths discovered, and manners and opinions change, with the change of circumstances, institution must advance also to keep pace with the times. We might as well require a man to wear still the coat which fitted him when he was a boy, a civilized society to remain ever under the regime of their barbarous ancestors." So it sounded like if so he thought that the world could change, right? I'm sure they weren't stupid. Sure. They knew that times could change. If they really felt strongly about this white thing, damn, I really wish they would have written it anywhere in the Constitution, even just one line, just a single line. But they couldn't write it anywhere. Why, Nick?
So again,
why, Nick?
Well, here's why they didn't write it in the Constitution, because you look at 1776. Think of the state of the world in 1776. I don't think it's ridiculous to say that they didn't need to codify it into law when up until 1965, non-white countries did not have sovereign governments. That up until 1965, every third world country, with the exception of Japan, with the exception of China to an extent, was under colonial control by a Western European government. So I don't get this. How much evidence do you need here? I mean, you're citing evidence. You're citing Thomas Jefferson's quote as evidence. Wait. You're citing Thomas Jefferson's quote that reform should happen, that the founders didn't intend for the country to be all of them expressed the sentiment that they did not want this to be a non-white country. They passed it into law. They did not want non-whites in the country. I mean,
Can you
it's
give
just-
me any
they
evidence
say-
whatsoever that the original drafters of the Constitution thought that it was self-evident that the country would always remain white?
I don't think you need evidence for that. I don't
Okay,
think
well,
you
that's
need
very
evidence
strange
for that.
because technically a
Sure.
lot of
Yeah, it's
constitutionalists
strange if
argue
you're being intellectually dishonest.
that things like the Bill of Rights shouldn't even exist, right? That whole document is a massive concession made to government. And one of the arguments made was that the Bill of Rights doesn't need to exist because these things are self-evident. So, for instance, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, right? The right to have guns. The idea was that the government shouldn't be able to do anything it's not allowed to do. There was nothing in the original Constitution that said the government can't take your guns. Why do we need a Bill of Rights to reaffirm that right? It sets a very dangerous precedent that the government will do everything except for what you tell it not to do. So there's already evidence at the very beginning of the life of the Constitution of people making concessions to people that want very specific demands in there, yet throughout all of the first 10 amendments, throughout all of the text of the Constitution, you can't find a single quote that backs up the idea of keeping the country predominantly white.
You're
Why?
right, Stephen. You're right, Stephen. They were so progressive. They left it out because their intention was that eventually the country would be non-white. That is the most sound argument I've ever heard in my life. That Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, George, I mean, all these people who many of them owned slaves, who they all affirmed in some capacity that they don't want blacks living in the United States. Their intention, you're telling me, even though they passed multiple laws saying only whites can be in the country, and this was the precedent for 200 years before people question it, their intention was that 200 years from when they signed four separate bills into law, affirming that only white people could be citizens, they intended that 200 years later, that would change? Is that your argument?
No,
Because
I never
we didn't
said that.
specifically say otherwise in the Constitution?
What I said was that the original founding fathers did not see America as being made of a particular demographic of people. I think that
You just said with Benjamin Franklin that he did. Did you not?
Wait, what?
You just said with Benjamin Franklin about the swarthy
I said
Germans,
you can find like
Europeans.
personal ideas that they had about that was more to show that your idea of a certain white people didn't exist. But even Benjamin Franklin himself didn't write that into law. My argument is that regardless of the person, no, because I made this distinction before. I'll make it again for you. Okay, I'll make it again for you. Okay, I'll make it again for you. Okay, if you want to argue to me that people at the time might have been racist, might have preferred white people over other people or whatever, that's an argument that I totally agree with. Obviously, there was still slavery. A lot of them were slave owners.
No. It's not that they might have. It's that they did.
Oh yeah,
Go
sure.
on.
Well, I mean, you could probably find like one or two that weren't whatever, but for the most part, yeah, I agree. I agree that they did have certain views on race and slavery and all of that. But that's not the argument you're trying to make. The argument that you're trying to make that the original intent. Well, I read it to you in the beginning, and you didn't disagree. I can reread it to you again, but I'll summarize it.
Go for it.
Okay, you said that the original constitutional intent was to never have mass immigration from non-European countries. That is something that you have failed to demonstrate over and over again. You're giving me random quotes. It is. You're giving me random quotes about.
We could go back to the preamble of the Constitution, which says that the Constitution is dedicated for ourselves and our posterity.
And you can't tell me another time of John Jay referencing posterity. The only other founding father that I can get who references posterity in official writings is John Quincy Adams, and when he talks about posterity, he says they must cast off their European skin, never to resume it. That they must look forward to their posterity rather than backward to their ancestors. That the government of the United States has never adopted any measure to encourage or invite immigrants from any part of Europe. So this sounds to me like it has nothing to do with European immigration.
It sounds like we're in agreement here because in 1990, 50% of the country was of the original founding stock from 1790. Stephen, wait. Stephen,
we're talking about the original intention of the Constitution.
Whoa, I just let you talk for a moment here.
Okay.
In 1990, we had 50% of the population that was that was from the founding stock from 1790. In the preamble of the Constitution, it says we dedicate this Constitution for ourselves and our posterity, and it's just weird to me because that says it all right there. The definition of posterity is your offspring. So,
well, which would be white Anglo-Saxons, not Germans, not Italians, not Spaniards.
Exactly. So then why would they dedicate the Constitution to their? I mean, how do you conceive that Indians and Mexicans are the posterity of the founders? How is the Constitution and this government for them? I mean, that's not the posterity.
Because the people that come to America and assume our American values and participate in our American democracy become Americans.
They become offspring?
They become Americans. This is why you cast off your skin. This is why you look forward to your posterity, not backwards to your ancestors. I'm totally settled down.
It's about no. What he said was cast off a European skin for the people that were there.
Yes,
before you had
and to look forward to your posterity, not backwards to your ancestors. So the whole point of America, yes, but the whole point of America wasn't to look back. I'm going by exactly John Q. Adams' words, and John Jay did not specify anywhere in the Constitution. I really wish he would have, because according to you, because of this one word that he wrote in the Federalist Papers, he felt really strongly about this. He didn't write it anywhere in the Constitution.
Well, here, let's get up. Let's look up what posterity means, because I want to help you out here. I want to help you understand. I'm a good guy. I'm a benevolent guy. So posterity means the descendant of a person.
I'm a good guy. I'm a benevolent guy.
Of the founding stock of the country. I'm just not finding all the
descendants of a person. If you come to the United States, the Congress is delegated by the Constitution. Yes.
Of the people that were here in 1790.
So if you don't
become a biological descendant of the.
If you don't like it, I understand if you don't like it, that's totally fine. But you have to understand that to your audience, you misrepresent yourself as a constitutionalist, because the Constitution grants Congress the power to naturalize a citizen, and then their descendants, that is the posterity of America. Correct, because they are Americans. Yes.
And the people, and then the people that were naturalized by the Congress when that were signed by the founders, free white persons of upstanding character. So you can't have it all ways where it's
I'm not trying to have it all ways. I'm going by the letter of the law in the Constitution.
No, you're flip-flopping. You're flip-flopping. On the one hand, you're saying they intended other people, but on the other hand, you're saying
said that.
Actually it contradicts your. It seems to be your fixation. Wait, pause. It seems to be your fixation on. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say only white people can immigrate here. The posterity argument is weak, granted, but it is true. You're saying, it's one word. It's one word.
It's one word in the preamble.
Yes, that sets out what the purpose of the document is, and then it says it determines what the Congress can determine who is naturalized. Okay, Congresses then the intent of future Congresses can determine who is American, but the founders, the intention of the founders for their time, for their country, for 200 years was white people. And if you want to say that the founders' intention was that would evolve, maybe in an abstract way. They wanted the country to reform. Thomas Jefferson did. He wanted constitutions to be written every 10 years. But I don't think you can specifically say that the founders, that there was any intent for it to be anything but what they signed into law. And sure, there's nothing in the Constitution that says.
What you keep conflating? You keep conflating laws passed by Congress with the Constitution. Why are you doing this?
I'm not doing that.
You are. You keep saying that this is what they believe for the Constitution.
You are conflating.
No.
You're conflating what's written in the Constitution with the intent of the founders. The intent of the founders was that this nation would be Anglo-Saxon. The Constitution doesn't specifically codify that would be the case, but that doesn't detract from the fact that every one of the founders wanted it to be a white country. You are trying to obfuscate and conflate the two by saying that the founders' intent was only what is delegated to the federal government in the Constitution, which is wrong. The founders for what they wanted for demographics, what they signed into law in Congress, what they wanted for their country in their favor, and then what presidents wanted for 200 years was for it to be white. The Constitution allows for changes.
No, wait. I have to stop you right there because you just told a lie. You just told a lie.
What was the lie?
You just told a lie.
For their country then and for the next 200 years.
These are all lies.
I agree with half of that. What they wanted for their country then was what they signed into law in Congress. But if they wanted it in law for the next 200 years, no, if they wanted it for the next 200 years, why didn't they put it in the Constitution, Nick?
I don't know. You'd have to ask.
I think they're pretty smart.
I think we could read from all of their quotes that they didn't want that. But you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe the founders were really progressive. Maybe they were progressive. You're right.
I'm not saying they were progressive. I'm saying that the original intent that you claims, it doesn't exist. It's not spelled out anywhere, and that you're
left it out. You're right. They left it out because they intended for the Congress to naturalize millions of Hispanics. You're right.
Why are you strawmanning me now, Nick? You were doing so good.
That's what you're saying. You're saying because they didn't explicitly say it in the Constitution, their intent was otherwise.
I do think it's really interesting right here that this is like
answer the question.
This is the epitome of feels versus reals. That I can point to you the letter of the law in the Constitution, and you're telling me, well, I feel like that they wanted something different. They were just too dumb to put it in.
I'm saying
that's
feels.
But they didn't say it. Why isn't it in the Constitution then, Nick?
because because there's a difference between what you're putting into government and government is a mechanism. What you want for your country is what you do in practice.
What you want?
Freedom of the press. They didn't want
What you want?
by the Constitution and Bill of
Wait,
Rights.
they didn't put, for example, they didn't put that they wanted churches in the country in the Constitution. Do you think they didn't want churches in the country? Did you think they?
No, but they didn't
Christian...
put that they didn't want churches in the country. So I mean,
and they didn't put it anywhere in the Constitution that they wanted mass immigration.
Okay. Your argument just proved my point. They didn't put in the Constitution that they didn't want churches. We have them. They didn't put in the Constitution that they didn't want immigration. Mass immigration. We have that. Were you trying to make a different point there?
No. They didn't put it in the Constitution, but they valued this. They didn't put the restriction on immigration, and they also valued that. You're misrepresenting the stop. Wow, the wacky little laugh there.
Wacky little laugh. I'm sorry.
Of the
Slimy Nick.
The language of the Constitution is different than the intent of the founders. Do you not believe that? Do you think that?
No, I don't believe that. I think the founders were very intelligent. I think we have the oldest surviving constitution used by any country on the planet. We have a constitution that was written in the 1700s that governs space travel. Really, really cool. I think the founding fathers were very intelligent. I think that if they thought that they wanted to characterize America in a specific way by talking about only a specific type of immigrant coming here, I think that they would have been smart enough to write that into the Constitution.
They did, yeah. It's called ourselves and our posterity.
And all you have is that one undefined word.
It's defined. It's in Federalist No. 2 by John Jay.
But it's not, because we can have an argument over what it means to be an American.
Sure, it's defined. But the Federalist Papers argued for the language of the Constitution. There's no, you just said there's nowhere else can you find the word posterity used until 30 years later. So I think that's the definitive source on that.
The definitive is the one word, and then the absence of any mention of immigration.
Yes, that tends to be the case.
Can you say that for me? I'm just curious. So you believe that your entire argument...
I'm not going to say anything for you, but...
So you think that your entire argument on keeping America some version of white that these
people... My entire argument. Wow, way to straw man me, slimy Steve.
Hey, I already used slimy, Nick. You can't take my adjectives, okay?
I can't, because there's consonants there, so it's even better, slimy Steve. But go ahead.
All right, nefarious Nick. I guess your entire thing just rests on this posterity. And so you believe that the founding fathers were too stupid to write this into law, that they couldn't do this in a way.
No, Stephen. Again, we could go round and round on this. I think we disagree. The difference between the founder's intent and the constitutional letter of the law. You have other, again, we keep going around and around on these things. We've already been at this for
what is all that?
How many other parts of the argument do you have?
Oh, I got another 3 or 4 parts if you want to go through them.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next.
Sure thing. Another point we have is you spoke about immigrants importing their problems. So it was one of the reasons why you were chiefly against immigration. So your argument, tell me if I state this unfairly. Listen very, very carefully here, Nick. I don't want to misstate anything you believe, okay? People immigrating from countries with severe problems are likely to bring those problems to the United States. If we bring in too many immigrants from any country with severe problems, a sufficient number of those immigrants could cause the United States to resemble the countries that they came from. You cannot divorce a country's people from problems. Do you think that's
correct?
That's an okay statement? Okay. So my counter argument to this is much the same as last time, except this time with more data, is that there's just not any evidence to support that. A lot of the problems that exist in other countries are structural or related to actual geography, and that immigrants themselves do not really have the power to bring this here, to bring those kinds of structural problems here. I guess the most cited data I can go by is just crime stats. And this is just something that is so extensively researched. There is just no data that shows that people commit more crime when they're an immigrant. It just doesn't exist. Even when you look at Central American groups, like even when you look at young, less educated Mexicans, Salvadorans, Guatemalan men, people that make up the bulk of even the unauthorized population, they have significantly lower incarceration rates than comparable groups of white people that are born in the United States, that are native born. I can just throw you a million links at this.
Be right back. I gotta go get some chocolate milk. Some chalky milk.
Yeah, I think you're arguing against the wrong part of it. You're saying immigrants commit
Don't let me die.
crime. I think the statistics are played around a lot.
What evidence do you have of that?
I'm not even going to try to dispute that.
Okay, so then don't even bring that up. Go on to the next. Okay, what is the next
I'm saying
one?
it's irrelevant because the point is that if immigrants bring any crime, if immigrants bring any disease, if immigrants bring any social ills, that is more than would have existed before. If, for example, if we bring in a Russian guy, or let's say we bring in 100 Russians, and these 100 Russians commit less crime than the native population, even though they commit less crime, either proportionally or in gross terms, they're still committing crime that wouldn't have been here had they not been in the country. I mean, that's the problem. And also it's problems of a different character. I mean,
can I speak to that specific thing before we go?
Sure.
So your philosophical argument is that if something brings a negative, no matter how big the positives are, that negative
What's the positive? I mean, what's the trade-off?
Well, I mean, you can argue for, I guess, for people like me, you've got greater. Well, actually, let's just go to the formal argument. The economic argument is the big one that's typically made.
What's economically beneficial about immigrants?
That's listed on a different part of my argument. Do we want to move over to that one? I mean, that's another thing with with just so much research behind it. I just can't possibly fathom a different conclusion.
I can show you a pretty good conclusion, but that'll be for the economic portion.
Okay, sure. So so do you concede if immigrants do bring positives over that it would be okay to accept some negatives, or do you philosophically disagree with that?
I disagree with that. I am against, and again, the types of problems are different, and the types of you say they're systemic, you say they're structural. Well, you see structures being put in place in this country that resemble the countries where they left. I mean, you look at Chinatown, for example, and Chinatown looks like China. You look at the black community in America. The black murder rate is.
Wait, what does the black community have to do with immigration?
Well, because blacks immigrated here from Africa. Well, they were brought here from Africa, but they are.
No, you can't. Black is not immigration. That's a totally different topic. Sorry.
Disagree.
Well, but you're just wrong. I mean, people freely immigrating here is way different than enslaving people and bringing them over. That's
no. But the question is, can people's problems be divorced from the places where they left? And I'm telling you that the people that left Africa are still having problems that are in Africa. And I will continue. The black murder rate in the United States is 19.4. That is more comparable to West African and sub-Saharan African countries than it is to any Western country. And then you subtract the black murder rate from
so good.
everybody else, and then the United States murder rate, if you subtract the black murder rate, is on par with other Western European countries. So Chinatown,
that's the only reason it's on par is because we have so many immigrants here that don't commit crime.
And then you have immigrants from Mexico, where they bring over their drug cartels, MS-13. They bring over, all kinds of crime. And maybe
none of this is borne out in the stats.
Again, maybe it's borne at a proportionally lesser rate, but you see that when they come over here, they have these tiny enclaves. They have these tiny enclaves where they don't learn English, they don't speak the language, and it tends to resemble the country that they fled. I mean, this is just, and that is the result of the scale of immigration and the persistence of Mexican immigration, and also for Asian immigration to some extent, and then the concentration of it. I mean, there are many elements to this why you're taking national statistics, on average for immigrants. Are you talking about like first-generation immigrants where there's less crime? Because I'm talking about like foreign-born populations altogether.
Oh, no, second-generation immigrants commit more crime.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, well,
but do you know why? That's because they're integrating. They're committing crime at numbers that are starting to resemble the native population.
They commit more crime than the native population, or
no, they're not quite caught up. But second-generation immigrants commit more crime typically than first-generation. That's just because they're moving to the norm.
What about third generation?
I don't have the stats for third-generation immigrants. I'm sorry.
Gotta have third generation.
And then if third generation didn't reach it, then you'd ask for fourth generation, and then fifth generation, and then pretty soon we're talking about Benjamin Franklin's descendants himself.
Here's why I raised that point, because if you look at the crime statistics from 2016, Hispanics commit much more crime than white people proportionally. And
proportionally, that's just not true. That's not true. What is your data on that?
Look at sure. Here, I'll bring it up. Does anybody have these in the live chat? Because this is pretty popular. There's a pretty good figure out there. It's got about 6. People know the one I'm talking about. It circulated on Twitter when it was published.
Interesting.
So
you got bats.
The Police Foundation, undocumented immigration and rates of crime and imprisonment, popular myths and empirical realities. Foreign-born Latin Americans have a 0.99% chance to be incarcerated compared to 1.71% of native-born white people. Even for illegal immigrants, Crime seems to have always been correlated with geography and income across all races. And this is according to a U.S. Department of Justice report, Household Poverty and Non-Fatal Violent Victimization. Crime has always been highly correlated with geography and income across all races and all income levels, with the exception of Hispanics, who always seem to be fairly underrepresented. I mean, identifying.
Okay, sure, but over, do you have the statistics on overall the crime rates for the different races? Do you have the overall numbers, like proportionately?
Yeah.
Like,
what?
Do you have the rate at which whites and Hispanics and blacks commit homicides, for example? Do you have that number?
Yeah, here you go. I threw you a thing.
Okay, let's see. Let's see what we got here.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. It's not copy-pasting. 1 second.
Let's see. That's not
No, this is your thing from earlier. Hold on 1 second.
Let's see. I just want to see, because all the numbers I've looked at says blacks and Hispanics commit much more crime than whites, and whites commit more crime than
Blacks
Asians.
do, but we're not talking about blacks. We're talking about immigration, Nick. I know that you like to lump all the darkies together, but we're just talking about immigration
right now. That's kind of a straw man from something I already explained, which is, can you divorce people from the problems of the homeland?
Yeah, but this is not their homeland, Nick. If somebody's ancestors come back to the 1800s here, you can't call them immigrants anymore, Nick. They're almost just as much here as Americans as people from the 17 or 1800s.
I'm not seeing, where's the numbers here? You've given me a 40-page
Yeah, I'm sorry. So scroll down to page 127, and you can start to see the comparisons of the ages, the percentage of people incarcerated, the native versus the foreign-born rate.
I'm not seeing any of the data I requested. I'm talking about, do you have homicide rates? Do you have incarceration rates? Do you have homicide rates for the different races? If you have, you said you have all the data. So do you have the data on homicides? I think that would be an important thing.
Okay, so we want. I mean, if I'll have to find you that data on that and what specific crime. If that's what.
No, because I mean, you're bringing me these statistics about like incarceration rates, but you haven't given me any.
Fucking.
I'm like.
So I have given you data on rates of crime and imprisonment. You have provided me nothing, and now you're asking me for data on a very specific crime and pretending that proves your point. I mean, come on, dude.
It sounds like it sounds
so
like
fucking bad,
man. You don't have the data to represent your point, because I think if you look at any data, and again, this is just a hunch. This is a hunch, but tell me if you can prove me wrong. If you look at homicide rates, if you look at rape rates, if you look at
here's another.
You have car stereo thefts. The rates of car stereo thefts. I raise. Fuck.
I mean, most of the immigrants moved to the cities.
I'm sorry. The cities is what I meant to say. I'm sorry. Studies of the effect. The title of this study is identifying the effect of
Give school lunch money thefts.
Scary Mexican towns that you say you drive into and could get shot at. Okay. So the abstract: studies of the effect of immigration on homicide in U.S. cities have reported mostly null or negative results. These studies suffer from a failure to weight by population size and the lack of a credible identification strategy. Using data from the census and the uniform.
The abstract. You're not. Did you look at the actual? Did you pay for the data? If you have the data, could you please send that to me? Because
do you have an academic background in interpreting this data? Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Why do you think it would be?
Data.
Steven, hold on, because I need to understand this point right here. Do you think that you're more qualified than the researchers themselves to interpret the data?
No, I think if we are going to make an informed decision, we have to look at the data, not someone else.
Okay, you have a fundamental misunderstanding of how data is used. Then I can't overcome this point.
Steve, and you come on my show, you try and tell me that immigration will not have an effect on crime, and you give me things that seem to be tailored. The data seems to be tailored to a very specific agenda, because again, if you produced overall crime by minority population.
No, I did produce overall crime. You didn't like that. Now I'm giving you a study based on homicide rates, and now you don't like this. I mean,
wow, this is.
What do you want me to? What stats do you want, Nick? Tell me what you want, and I'll see if I have it here.
I know what I want. I want homicide rates.
Okay, well, this is a study on homicide rates in U.S. cities, showing that.
No, I don't want that. I want homicide rates by race. Do you have that?
Let me try. I'll try to find it for you. I mean, I'll find. I'm sorry. Like, I have like 15 different numbers here, but I don't have the very precise number that you have. However, you have no data, and you're trying to place this burden on me when this is like one of the most well-accepted parts of immigration. That crime typically doesn't rise with immigrants coming in. Like,
wait a second. Steven, I think you're in trouble here. Steven, you're about to be in big trouble here, I believe.
Oh,
your argument is in peril. Let's see. Okay, so we've got our FBI chart here, and let's see total arrests, and let's see what we have for. Let's see, do we have rates here? Percentage distribution. Okay. I'm not seeing a percentage distribution. Total arrests, total.
Oh no, floor says 45.
It's looking like we have. Wow, well that can't be right. That could not possibly be right. How could we have blacks committing so much more crime if
Why are we talking about blacks again, Nick?
I mean, again, the question which you it's your words, Stephen.
Hard hat.
Can we divorce?
Oh, I'm so close to having that. Let's avoid spirits.
Somebody that's here, that's been in this country for 200 years, is having a different homeland. Why do you keep saying this?
So, all I need is slimes and void spirits.
And we see the systems that blacks create. That is demonstrative of what kind of effect blacks will have in our society. So maybe homeland is a bad word because they were born here, but ancestrally, I mean, this is the comparable situation here. When we have these rates that resemble other places, when we have people that are here that after generations and their systematic problems still resemble the countries that they came from.
Do you have evidence? Do you have evidence that there's like some black genetic predisposition towards creating? Because if without that, this is.
Well, I mean, I couldn't speculate on that. You could Google something called the warrior gene. I'm not.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm going to stick with my data here. I'm sorry. Did you have an argument rooted in data that you wanted to make, or?
Don't get the warrior gene. This doesn't look like what I'm looking for. Somebody needs to give me a link. That is not. Oh, I miscopied the first part of that.
Nervous Nick sounds like he came unprepared for the crime argument.
No. I'm not. Look, I didn't come with the crime argument because my position is anybody who comes here and commits crime, it's too much. Because
but the problem is
for our citizens to be murdered because we want cheaper consumer goods, I don't think is good.
But you don't believe that argument. No.
I'm just saying. I think you're wrong.
You don't believe that argument.
That different people come here and they don't produce the societies.
You don't believe that. Can we talk about that philosophical argument, because it's not something you believe? You're saying that if something presents a negative, that it is always unacceptable regardless of the upside.
No. That is you're being a bit reductive there. That is not.
Yeah, exactly, of course. I'm trying to understand the merit of your argument. You're saying that if immigrants bring problems, it doesn't matter if there are benefits, if there are bad things that come with them.
What I'm saying is, if our people are under siege, and under siege in particular.
Can you please not load your language? Can you just speak normally, like you're making your argument instead of?
Wow, you're being a little bit defensive on.
No, I'm not. But I just want you to speak plainly. Don't say our people are under siege. Just speak plainly.
They're under siege.
No one's under siege, Nick.
They're under siege.
No one's under siege.
By inner city violence, and if you're having people that are getting killed or getting raped or things getting stolen, I don't think crime. I don't think what they bring in the form of cultural disruption and crime and all the negatives that they bring, not just the crime. You said it was just one negative. It's many negatives. Crime is one of them.
And many positives that outweigh the negatives.
Wrong. I don't think that expense to the country is worth bringing. Morally, I don't think you can justify it.
So how do you justify the existence of cars that cause people to literally die? 30,000 some people a year plus die, not to mention how many are injured because of the existence of cars. Cars are murdering. We're under siege by automobiles, Nick. Our children, Nick, are being killed by automobiles. How can you justify their existence in this country?
Do you believe that immigrants are as necessary as straw men? I'm sorry. Do you believe that immigrants are as necessary as cars?
We could probably live without cars. We would have to build closer together. We would have to have bike. Yeah, we could do public transportation. Plenty of places in Europe do it. Our investment in public transportation is abysmal in the United States. If you go to New York City, you can make it by New York City without a car. Sure.
Well, we wait for you to find the data on the color of crime.
Nick, why don't we? Wait. Why couldn't you answer my question? Why do you think cars are acceptable when they cause so much harm? Is it because of their upside?
Told you, yeah, because the upside outweighs, and also the difference is a moral difference. Having car crashes, having like chaos is something that you will always have, but having people who have a predisposition to certain systems or certain crimes, et cetera, that
predisposition that you haven't borne out in any stats at all, Nick. You can't use that as an argument, Nick.
I think I found the data I was looking for. I think I finally found it. Here we go. Now, why is all this heavy sign? So we have 44% of murder and non-negligent manslaughter is whites. That's weird because they're 67% of the population.
Can you throw me this link, please, so I can look at it?
Yeah, sure. I'll send it to you. It's just weird that the whites are not committing a proportional amount of crime. It's almost like there's
but there's a really good reason for that, Nick. Do you want to know a really good reason for that, Nick?
What's the reason?
Do you want
for it?
Okay. Open up two Google tabs right now, okay? Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Look up median age of a white person and then look up median age of a Hispanic person. And then here's a little chart right here.
Oh, it's because they're younger.
Yes. Younger people tend to commit. That's why maybe you can find some stats from the Daily Caller that show that a greater percentage of Hispanics commit crime than white people. But the problem is that when you weight these things by age, as they should be, you find that the numbers of Hispanics committing crime are generally lower than white people.
Them by age, though? I mean, why would we be waiting if they're committing more crime? You conceded just now that they committed more crime. So if they commit more crime, why would we be weighting it by age? What difference does it make if it's proportionally?
Because that difference is paramount. Because if you were to,
but they're going to be younger. They're going to be younger.
Not for much longer, Nick, because they're in our country and they're getting older. Nope, because they're in our country and they're getting older, Nick.
In Mexico, the birth rate is 2.7. So when they come over here, they're going to have more children.
The number of Mexicans in the United States has been dropping off, Nick. The birth rate in Mexico, Nick. Nick, the birth rate in Mexico has been.
Are you arguing for us to curtail immigration? If it is, then we
no, but I'm saying it's happening naturally. It started under Obama a decade ago, Nick. In 1970, Nick, in 1970, Nick,
they're going to be young,
Nick,
and therefore they will commit more crime.
Not more crime than young white people. Not more crime than young white people, Nick. In 1970, the birth rate in Mexico was almost 7 births per woman. That number is down to almost 2 now, Nick. I don't think that Mexicans are going to be birthing so many people and sending them over here. In fact, the number of Mexicans in the country has decreased over the past 10 years, Nick. Even without the wall up, Nick, there's less and less of them coming here. I don't think you got to worry about it. Don't worry, my dude.
They're the only ones that are keeping our fertility rate afloat. If you look at it, the white fertility rate is much lower than the Hispanic fertility rate. I mean, to argue that Hispanics are not going to be young for a long time is just misleading. And if you're conceding that they commit more crime, again, I don't even know what we're still doing here. If you're saying they commit more crime, but they commit more crime.
I never said they commit more crime. I never made that statement. No.
You said, well, even if they do, well, it's because they're young. How can you concede that they commit more crime because they're younger, but then say they don't commit crime?
You have to adjust these stats. You have to adjust these stats for age. It's an important part of understanding where the crime is coming from, Nick.
They're going to be young.
But that's not true, Nick. Look at the median age of the Hispanic population in the United States. It's growing and growing and growing as more Hispanics are aging here. The amount of people coming in from other places, Hispanic people, are leveling off. So no, Nick, that's not true that they're going to continue to remain young.
Tell me this, yes or no? Are Hispanics going to be younger than whites in the next 25 years?
I really don't know the answer to that.
The answer is yes.
You don't know that. You don't. Asymptotically, it might approach. If anything,
because the birth rate is higher.
But you don't. But the birth rate has been falling, Nick.
Okay, but it's higher.
Right now it is, but if it falls, if it asymptotically approaches the white birth rate, then they'll probably level out.
Motherfucker.
And until that happens, what will they be, Stephen? Will they be younger or older or the same age? They will be younger. So tell me when they start committing the same amount of crime as us. And then maybe I'll say, okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, in your world where you want white people to have more children, they would be committing less crime than us. So, I mean, if white people kept having 2.5 or 3.0 whatever births per woman, then Hispanics would be underrepresented in the crime again. But they don't because white people don't make kids, Nick. Adjusting for age is very important. If you want to honestly look at these stats and have a good idea of what's going on.
No. But you're saying proportionally they commit less
Nick,
crime.
Why do you want? I'm curious about this now. Why do you want more white people making kids if they're going to commit more crime? You admitted earlier that the age thing is important.
Actually, I'm tired.
It is a country that we want to be culturally the same. The problem with crime is that it's from somewhere else. It is controllable. You will always have crime in a society. If I wanted a society that just had less crime, I would say we should become an Asian country. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying the problem is when we bring people in and they commit crime, it's debatable at what rate they commit the crime, depending on how you index it. And you don't have the figures, obviously, on
I've
the
given you plenty of figures. I mean, I can throw you more.
On incarceration. You've given me figures on incarcerations. You haven't given me the figures on arrests. You haven't given me the rest of the data that I've requested.
What is the do you want like some psychic omniscient being? Oh, well, you believe in that, so maybe you do. That can determine like how many crimes are committed.
Psychic omniscient being, or can I get the rate at which Hispanics commit murders compared to whites? I don't think those two are the same. So, again,
I mean, this study very specifically talks about the effects of immigration on homicide rates in the United States.
Obviously, it only goes 2
99
generations.
stone.
Immigration will continue for much longer than 2 generations.
Okay.
It has continued. For
Okay,
much
that's
longer.
cool. So you admit then that this is just all baseless conjecture on your part. You right?
When you say no, wrong.
Where's your data then, Nick?
When you say that again, when you're making the claim, if you can't support your claim,
I already supported my claim, Nick. You said that my data doesn't count. So where is your data?
Disprove a claim that you have not proved.
Nick, I already gave you data that says that immigrants do not contribute to more violence, more homicide, specifically in cities.
Data. That is an abstract. That is not data. If you had numbers for me, I would say different. But you gave me an abstract that says, according to, and we don't know what the numbers are. We don't know what the methodology was.
Okay, so Nick, if I gave you the actual PDF, what would you want me to go to the ground and talk to the researchers themselves, to talk to every single individual person that they interviewed, Nick?
Your data is flawed. Every piece of data you give me is either misleading or you're not actually giving me the data. You've given me an abstract of data. I could give you an abstract of data from
do it.
I could give you an abstract on data from America or US Inc. I could give you
Are those peer-reviewed journals?
I don't know.
Well, go ahead and give me an abstract. I'll wait right now. Can you give me an abstract? Nick, can you give me an abstract?
If you give me the numbers I'm asking for, I'm ready. Steven,
I gave you the numbers in the Cato report, Nick.
I'm standing here waiting to concede your argument if you give me the numbers. If you give me the numbers.
It was in this PDF, Nick. It's all listed right here.
So, which PDF? The one that you sent me, just the abstract?
No, the one that has the incarceration rates in the United States.
Oh, but the incarceration rates is a lot different than arrests, isn't it?
Why would the incarceration rate be different than arrests?
You understand that people get arrested and not all of them get incarcerated. Surely you understand this, don't you?
So do you think that Mexicans all have high-profile lawyers and they're able to get it? If anything, this would benefit whites.
Yeah, that's what I think. No, wrong. You have not given me the information on arrests. You have not given me the information on how often these people.
Oh, it's just gonna keep giving me.
How often they're incarcerated for crimes, and you're saying that is representative of the rate for illegal aliens. We don't even know how many illegal aliens there are in the country.
We have a decent guess. It's about 13 million.
No, we don't.
It's about 13 million.
Depending on who you ask, it could be anywhere between 11 and 30 million, depending on who you ask. So the whole point of illegal immigration, of undocumented immigration, is we have no idea who these people are, how many of them there are. So you give me a study saying incarcerated people, and this is a rate of them. You don't know how many were arrested. You don't know how many there.
Nick, I need you to give me some numbers, dude. If you're gonna nitpick this, or this is just incarceration, or this is just an abstract of a peer-reviewed article, I'm gonna need to see the actual data, Slick Steve. I'm gonna need you to give me some data, Nick.
That's so slick. If you don't have the data,
I've already given you data, Nick. You don't like my data. This is one of the least debated things right now in American,
You gave me the rate at which they are incarcerated. That's not arrests. That's not what I asked for. That's not representative of crime. And then you gave me an abstract, which we didn't see the data for. And then you gave me a rate at which illegals commit crime, or a rate at which, you gave me the rate at which illegals commit crime. And illegals, there's no way to determine a rate, because to determine a rate, you have to know how many of the people there are, how much of the population.
This is mainly on immigration, not on illegal immigration, and we know those numbers. This is all on immigration, not illegal immigration.
Generation is it again, and then you get the information where you don't have third and fourth generation. But again, the problem
Nick,
is,
come on, are you serious? Well, if
Nick,
I give you third and fourth, you're gonna go, well, what about you want to argue about fourth immigrant crime? So somebody that came here in 1920, you would consider them to be a fourth immigration immigrant? That's ridiculous.
Because if we're talking about how we're going to reorder our society and change the demographic composition of it, you need to have good
That's bullshit.
people that are going to be on their best behavior because they don't want to be deported in the first generation, and then in 2 or 3 generations it doesn't work out so well. So
do you consider? I'm curious. Do you consider?
Because you have not produced for me the numbers, I will find the numbers for you.
Do you
Loom. Oh, butter and Cambrishini.
It depends. It depends on. That's kind of a loaded question. It's all relative, of course.
Well, would you want Italian immigrants in the United States? Are they white enough for you?
Are Italians good stock relative to what?
Control
relative to what time? Relative to who else is coming in the country?
You really can't answer this, yes or no?
If you're talking about the 19th century, I would say no, because you have
the mafia, right?
What?
Things like the mafia and whatnot, right? Are really big in Italian communities, especially in New York.
That's Southern Italy. That's different. You have an IQ difference there. But if you're talking about the 19th century, people that are coming here, and you have countries where people can come here from Northern Europe, fine and well.
What about? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
when they're coming here from Africa or Asia or Mexico, and you have whites as a global population shrinking, we can't afford to be choosy about who we bring in the country. I would love to
300.
establish the nature of the country. That's not to say Italians aren't great people. I'm Italian. I love
What about like Aryans? Do you consider these people to be good stock?
Aryans? Why? Why do you ask that question?
Because the Aryan Brotherhood is a gang that makes up less than 0.1% of the prison population, but they're responsible for 1/4 of the murders that occur in there. It seems like they have some problems too. It seems like everybody has their problems.
Gang killing people in prison? Are you saying?
What?
Wait, what was the statistic
They're
again?
the Aryan Brotherhood. Very, very small percentage of the prison population. They kill almost 1/4 of the people, or they're responsible for 1/4 of the...
So you think that gangs in prison are representative of races committing crime? And I mean, this is just, do you honestly believe this stuff?
I mean, you're the one asking me for hyper-specific...
Give me the numbers. No, I'm not. I'm asking for actually very general information.
I've given you the very general information. You ask for more specific. My overall crime stats aren't good enough for you. You want arrest stats, or the arrest stats aren't good enough for you. You want the homicide stats, or the homicide stats aren't good enough for you. You want the 3rd and 4th generation homicide stats. You want whatever narrative will fit. Here, actually, here's the PDF of that study for the cities. There you go, Nick. Pour over the data yourself.
Don't worry. I got it. Here we go.
Okay, there it is. I want to hear your professional, your academic interpretation of this study, Nick.
I don't even need it.
What?
I don't even need it because I will find. Let's see. Does the information contain what I want?
I don't know. I'll be back on tonight. Thanks for stopping by.